Okay, really quickly, I want to take a look at our website. So if you take a look at the resources for this week, right now there is a couple of readings in here. Next week we're really going to talk. We're gonna have a discussion in class about the ethical issues and the moral issues that surround retouching. So I'm asking you to read through all of these. They're not that long, but I think this will help possibly focus your perspective on this, possibly raise new issues that you maybe haven't thought about, whatever. So anyway, I'm asking you to please that, especially this very top one, what's documentary about photography, and then also these two movies. They're two very short, quick movies, so you don't need to worry about that. And then finally, while we're here on this page, this is also going to show up in your session, the assignment folder. There are a series of PDFs here that are about split frequency retouching. How many people in here have done any split frequency work? 2. Well, that's good. So very few habits to break. Also, while I'm here, really quickly, we are going to take a look at the assignment from week 5. Briefly, we're actually going to do it together in class. So, unless I'm mistaken about this, it says knock out this file 081025 of the ER. And so, yeah, do that using channels and levels, zero selective color and color range, and add it to a white background to create 3 separate files. 2 people in this class did that. Everyone else didn't. 2 people in this class passed this assignment. Everybody else failed it. So I'm beginning to think you guys are not reading this shit. So, and you're not alone. This is happening in all my classes. So I know we're all excited about spring. It's coming up, but it's time to think now, here in the present, not 2 weeks from now when you're on the beach or in a drunken stupor in your room or whatever it is you're planning. Is anybody going to do anything fun for spring break? What are you going to do? Oh, well, good. I guess.
Yeah.
Depends on Florida. Which part? Okay. All right. Anyway, so I'm just going to throw that out here. Again, we do so many assignments in this class. If you fail this assignment, it's not going to really impact your grade hugely. But then I've also got issues with a number of people who are not turning stuff in, but I've reached out to all of you. You know who you are. So this is the middle of the semester. We have all dug ourselves into whatever holes we've dug ourselves into. We can dig ourselves out. We still have time, but not a lot. Okay. So just a couple things I want to show you really quickly. And again, I'm not pointing any of this out to blame anyone or to humiliate anyone or embarrass anyone or do any of that kind of stuff. But I just... Cooper had one that had a situation on it that I just wanted to show everyone. So for the most part, it was pretty well done, except for this. So you can see in the spill removal that's happened on this hair, it's also spill removed all the color of the ear right here. So when you get down to working in areas like this, you can no longer use a soft edge brush. You've got to go to a hard edge brush and a very small one. Zoom in and take your time. But what I told you guys before, and this is true, the thing to remember about doing spill removal is that it can be a cumulative thing. So for instance, watch what happens here. So I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to fix this thing right now. You would think you couldn't fix it, but you can. I'm going to make it a little bit larger brush. And I'm going to change the blending mode of my brush to color. This is where the spill is being removed. It's this layer right here. So 2 tricks in doing this. First is hold down. So if you take a look at this, I'm going to zip back out, sorry. Just to see where the spill part removal has actually happened. If you hold down your shift key and you click on the mask, it goes away. And this way you can actually see hairs that you've possibly missed. Like you can see this area over in here. There's little hairs that are running right up in here that still have spill in them. You can spot it from right here. So I could hold down my Option key. Oh, by the way, did everybody see my email about, or my announcement about how to flip that sample color from loading your background as opposed to? I've never seen that. This is the first time in all of these years I even knew that that existed. I mean, I know that the tab exists, but I've never seen that ever happen to anyone ever. Anyway, so but nonetheless, I'm going to hold down my Option key to sample that color right there, and then I can come in and I can paint through this color right here, and I'm trying to paint on my mask with a very low opacity. So 100% opacity, 100% flow. I'm going to keep my brush medium hard now because I'm at that area where I don't want to spill over onto the skin. And then just come in here and finish this part out. So it's a way to spot hair that you've actually missed, or whatever it is you're trying to remove spill on. So if we look on the other side, yeah, you can see that this is all pretty good there. There's a few things that are out here that are missed. However, this area that's screwed up in here, you again, it's just got a color that's been painted on it. You can actually paint on. Go away, Siri.
I didn't get that.
No,
Could
go
you try
away.
again?
Go away. Get the hell out of my life. Thank you. It's just had this grayish color painted on it. You can go turn right around and paint flesh color over it. So I'm going to sample flesh color right here, and then simply come in here and paint over this. So you can continue to go back and forth. It's just something to remember about doing all of this part. Now, if you feel like your color is too strong there, and I actually do feel like that's too strong there, I'm going to undo both of those. I like to work with spill doing flow. So I'm going to bring my flow like way down. And then I can start just scrubbing in these areas, and it takes on much lighter. It doesn't come on so quick. It lets you sort of like build this up slowly. There's also more of it that's right down in here and in here. So anyway, that's how I would fix that. That's the only part I wanted to show you there. The other part I want to show you, and I keep talking to you about this, is for you to check your masks. So let me reset my color space, my retouching space. So if I back out, hold down my Option key and click on the mask, you can see the mask. And when I zoom into here, does anybody see a problem? You can't miss it. It looks like cottage cheese. Look at all this. Is this a decent, good mask? No, this is full of contamination. All of it. Look at this. And Kibber, you weren't alone. Look at all this shit over here. Why didn't all that get cleaned out? You weren't the only one. So, I'm just saying that, guys, we need to amp up the level of work here. You need to be thinking professional. You need to be thinking about going the extra mile. You need to be thinking about considering all of those things. Okay, with that said, I would like to do this thing from scratch. So if you can find a copy of this, if you have your old copy, the copy that you turned in, you can for your homework, you can open that up and just get rid of all the work that you did, and then we're going to do it again together. So I'm going to just go find another version of mine, but I need you to have a virgin copy of this. We're going to blow through this pretty quick, so get ready. And this is the beginning of your assignment for this week, so you really want to do this. Okay. Okay, so the whole goal here was to use 3 different methods to actually isolate this person from the background and see which one we thought was the best. Again, it's what I've tried to tell you guys in the beginning, that I am not here to dictate or pontificate or tell you that this is the way you have to do something. That's not the point. The point is that I show you different ways to do things and let you make your own informed decision about which is the best way to do it. So the first way we learned to actually separate or to knock out really difficult things like this hair on this background was channels. So that's going to be the first way. That's the first method we're going to use here. So I'm just going to go channel surfing. I'm going to look to see which one of these channels gives me the most contrast between, again, the background and the hair. I don't care about her skin. I can do that with a pen tool. That's the simplest selection in the world here. But her hair against that background, that's my challenge. So when I look at the red channel, again, to do these things, you click in the middle of the channel. You don't click on the icon. You don't click all the way over where the little number is. You click right in the middle, and it'll allow you to select the channel. If somehow, for some reason, you have a problem doing this part, sometimes if you've got an extra layer, I'm just going to put a blank layer up on top of mine and then come back in. Sometimes it gets a little wonky when you do this, and you simply have to go back down and select your background layer and do it. In this case right now, it's working, but who the fuck knows what's going to work in Photoshop tomorrow or from this day on. Anyway, it's red channel. No good for me separating the hair. Again, I'm looking for contrast from the hair and the background. The green one is better. The blue one is worse. So the green one is going to be my option. That's the one I'm actually going to go after. So I'm going to copy the green channel just by dragging it down to the little icon at the bottom. That's the square with the plus in the middle of it. I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to rename this Channel Knockout. Perfect. And then I'm going to zoom in to the curls on her. Again, if we think clock face, 3 o'clock on her head. I'm looking in here, and again, I'm looking for a place to put down a color readout that I know in her hair that should be black. Now, there's an area that's in this curl that's really touching the edge, right, sort of in the middle of the right side screen, that I'm afraid of. I'm afraid there's too much hair in here that should be transparent. So this is a dangerous place to go. So is the rest of this curl that's up in here. That's also a dangerous place to be. I need something that I know for certain is really going to be opaque. So I'm actually going to go after this chunk right here. Now again, we've had this conversation before. If I select this area right here and I get it to go black, this area that's these highlights on her head are not going to be at black yet. But my worry is that these highlights that we're looking at, that I'm hovering over right here, are it's gloss, it's shine, it's in her hair. It's not really her hair color. It's really a direct reflection of the light that's on this image. So I'm not going to pick that either. That would make for too aggressive a mask. But I'm going to go for something that's light in this area up in here, sort of the lighter edges. Again, I want to stay away from the darker ones, because the darker ones, if you pick this as a sample point, then the ones that are lighter will actually not get to black. So you need to decide, number one, what really should be black, meaning what is completely opaque hair, not any transparency at all, and then our background. So that's where I'm going to do. I'm going to hit something right in the middle right here. So over to my toolbar, to the tool that looks like an eyedropper, click on it. You'll get a flyout menu. You want to come down to the second of the eyedropper tools, the color sampler tool. Check to make sure that your sample size is a 3x3, not a point sample. And I'm going to come over here and pick the lightest of the areas in here, and I'm going to hit one right there. So that's going to be my color for the hair. So you can see that you get a K readout underneath this. So I've got a point number 1. The points that you lay down are numbered, and then the corresponding readouts are also numbered in your info palette. If we don't want to see this in K, we want to actually see this in RGB, so click on the eyedropper and come down to RGB, and you can see that this is telling me, in my case, that the total gray value underneath this is a 68, 68, 68. So perfect, that's what that is. Then I'm going to go find a place that's actually going to give me the background, and I want to get away from the hair. So I would not try to pick a background that's in this area right in here, because I would be too worried that part of it has got hair in it. So, and I feel the same way about this. But if I go up to the top of the image, out to the upper right hand corner, I can put another point out there, and that's going to be my background color. I'm again going to use my drop down menu and my info palette and change this to RGB color. So now my goal in this is apparent. So I've got hair that's at 60s, in the high 60s, that I need to go to 0. I need it to be black, and then I've got a background that's in the 138s, that so midtones, mid-grays, whatever, that I need to go white. That's what I'm going to try to do here. So my next move on this is to run levels on this. Command L is the easiest way to do it. If you can't remember the keyboard shortcut, you simply come up to the edit menu, the image menu, down to adjustments, down to levels. You see Command L is right next to it. This is not an adjustment layer. This is actually, this is a destructive move on this channel, but it's this channel. I could copy this. I can make another copy of this channel anytime I want. So I don't care about destructive moves on things that are not essential or that I can't undo. So anyway, I'm going to grab my black point slider underneath the histogram on the left-hand side, and I'm watching my readout over here in this panel. So in my number one readout, I'm just watching that the values that are on the left-hand side of this double readout are the original values. The values on the right-hand side are going to be the new values when we make a change. So this sort of gives you shows you exactly what it is you're doing. So my goal is to get these numbers to 0 right here. So I'm going to click on my black point underneath the histogram and start to drag towards the right, and I'm watching this readout the whole time right here. When you get close to 0, you want to stop. You want to tap this in just a single arrow key at a time. So I'm just tapping this in until I get to 0, because you want to do the absolute minimum to get to 0. The changes that we're making here, we want them as minimal as we can possibly make them, yet achieve the thing that we're trying to achieve. So so those are zeroed out. I'm now going to go to my white point underneath the histogram and start to pull it to the middle. And again, I'm looking at the after readout on my point number 2. I need to get that to 255, well, close to 255. You'll see I hit 255 right here. If you hit that, pulling those sliders, back it off a little bit till you get a little bit of tone so that you can use your arrow keys to finesse this in. So I'm going to tap my arrow keys. Recheck your shadow point. You can see in my shadow point, when I made the adjustment in the white, the shadow point came up. So I need to select the shadow point value. It's easier than selecting the tool. And then just use my arrow keys to tap that in. So now I've got zeros for the hair, meaning the hair is black where the point that I had, and I've also got 255 for white. So, but before I do this, I can still use my zoom in and zoom out keyboard shortcuts. So I want to zoom out to take a look at what's really going on. Spacebar, Command, and Option, those three negative. And we're just going to zip out, and I'm going to take a look at this. And then I'm going to zip back in to, I really want to see the hair part up in here. Because it's, how much of the integrity of that really fine hair did we keep? So you do have a preview check mark on your levels control. You want to turn that on and off and see if you're still keeping, if you like what you're seeing here. So I like this. I can see a lot of background that's actually coming through this. So I'm feeling good about all of that. So this is how I'm going to go with it. So I'm going to just click OK to that. And I'm going to double click the hand and see what we've actually got going on here. So I've got a pretty good mask for the hair. I've got a pretty good mask for the right side, the left side of her face, whatever, but I have nothing on the other side. So I'm simply going to try this trick again. So I'm going to try to find a mask that will give me her ear and then whatever's on this right side of her body. So I'm going to go back up to my red channel and I'm going to click on that. And this is a pretty good outline for my background. If you take a look at this, this is actually pretty well done. I mean, should be pretty easy. So I've got good separation between her skin and the background. If I'm going to go to the green channel, they're almost identical, horrible. And the blue channel is better than the green, but nobody touches the red. So I'm going to copy the red channel just by dragging it down to the very bottom of the icon that's got the little square in it. I'm going to double click on this and I'm going to call this right cheek temp, meaning temporary. We're just going to use this to help build my selection. So right cheek temp. And say OK to that. I'm going to zoom into this edge of her face. I'm going to put down another 2 color sampler points, one on her face right here, one on the background out right next to it. Change both of those values to give me RGB readouts as opposed to K readouts. And now here we go again. So in this case, in our first case, I had my dark points on the left-hand side, my lighter points on the right-hand side. Now I've just flipped them. It doesn't matter. Your readouts are your readouts. So you know that you need the lighter one to go white and the darker one to go black. So Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. Click on the black point slider underneath and start to drag over. And what I'm looking at is my black points right here. I need those 76s to get down to zeros so that my background is black. I get to 2, I'm going to stop and go to my arrow keys. And now it's 0. Then I'm going to grab my white point slider and push it back in the opposite direction till I get close to 255. Stop. Go to your arrow keys. Recheck your shadow part, and we are good to go on this. So again, I'm going to zip back out to make sure that I'm getting what I think I should be getting here. Use your preview check mark. All I care about is this line by her face. I feel like there's a little shadow still on her skin part up in here. So I can paint that out with a paintbrush, which I actually might do. But if I come here really close to this edge right here, I'm getting more tone that's down here close to her face. So I'm going to move this color sampler point. To move the color sampler point, you hover over it, hold down your shift key, and you will get the color sampler tool. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to push it up into here, into this space right here. I could go in here and do an overlay brush on this, but I might as well just do the, I'm here right now. I might as well do the work right now. So that puts me at a 219, so I need to get more aggressive with my white point. So I'm going to continue to push it over, get closer to 255, stop, go to my arrow keys. And that seems a much cleaner line to me. I'm going to zip back out. Yeah, I like the way that looks better. All right, so I'm going to say OK to that. So then basically what I care about is just this edge. I don't care about her lips and all the inside of her face. I can get all of that. But if I load this thing as a selection, areas that are dark, so this background will be hidden. I won't be able to paint on those areas. Areas that are light, I will actually be able to lay tone down. So that's how I'm leveraging this. Is that making sense to everybody? Okay, let's just look at this really quickly. I'm going to load this thing as a selection. Hover over the thumbnail, the icon of this image. Hold down your Option key. I'm sorry, your Command key, and click. And we've just loaded this as a selection. It's actually loaded the luminosity of it. So if we come over here to our layers palette, and I'm going to add a blank new layer up on top of this, and I'm going to turn off the bottom layer, and then I'm going to pick a weird color. I'm going to pick a red. So I've clicked on my foreground color picker, and I'm going to type in a red value. So again, for the red, type in 255, hit the tab key and go to green and hit 0, tab key and go to blue and also hit 0. That's a pure red, and say OK. So now red is my foreground color. You'll see I've got an active selection going. It's the marching ants. And now I'm going to fill this selection with that red. Again, red's my foreground color, so Option delete, Command D to deselect. And so what you can see is that areas that were light in this have actually now had the color has actually been applied. Where the things are not light in this, so if we take a look at this channel knockout right here, this is the one, I didn't load the temporary one, I loaded the one that I'm having a problem with. And it exactly matches this. So if you take a look, this is the image that I loaded. So all this area that's white, all her skin that's white, the background that's white, her ears that are white, whatever, all of that loads. And when I then fill that with color or paint on it, whatever, it allows the ink to be placed down. The ink hits the screen. Where the areas are black, it is, again, it's not selected. It does not allow that to go down. So this is why I get this. The areas that were dark have no ink in them at all. The areas that are the lightest have the most ink in them. And then areas that are in the midtones have some ink in them. Does this make sense? All right, so I'm going to leverage that. If you've made this layer, throw it away. We don't need it. I'm going to go back. I've got my right cheek temporary one. It looks like this. I'm going to hold down my command key. I'm going to click to load this as a selection. Now I know when I use this selection to paint, this edge where the skin is white will take ink. The area that's the background that is black will not take ink, which is exactly going to fix my problem. So then I'm going to go up to my channel knockout. I've still got an active selection going. Hit the B key to get a brush. Make sure that it's a normal brush. It doesn't really matter how hard or soft your brush is because the selection is going to control where the ink goes and where it doesn't. So I'm going to leave mine at 50% roughly. Make sure you have 100% opacity and 100% flow. We'll be working a lot on our tablet today, so I've already got mine on. If you don't have your tablet on, it doesn't matter. But watch what happens. I'm going to make my brush pretty large. And then I'm simply going to click here and start to paint down, and you can see it's giving me the edge that I had that was missing. This is the only thing I really need is this guy right here. I just needed that edge. The rest of this I can hand paint. So Command D to deselect, and then I'm just going to finish this part. Make this a little bit bigger, make that a little bit bigger. And then you can either paint this whole thing in, or you can hit the lasso tool and lasso all of this in. And fill that with black. Black is my foreground color, Option Delete. Now I've got all that shiny part in her hair that I need to finish. So Command D to deselect. So to do that, I've just got a regular brush. In this case, you want to make sure you have a hard brush. You don't want any oversprayed because you're worried about your edges. I'm going to just make this larger. And I know all of this here is solid. Now, I don't know about these edges out here. I'm going to stay away from those. But all this stuff that's in here, all of that, I know needs to go. How did I do what?
How did you fill this with the lasso selection with black?
Which one?
When you did the lasso around the face.
Again, black is my foreground color. Option Delete.
Okay.
So anyway, for this stuff that's really closer to the edges, I'm going to change this to an overlay brush. And then I'm going to zip in and just see what I've got going on in here. Like I think that this is hair. It's not background, I don't think. So anyway, make my brush a little bit smaller and hit that out. And just kind of work my way around it. I can see that this is, again, an edge right here. This is all shine. And that part's good. This should all go. For this part, I can go back to a normal brush. Again, as long as it's a hard brush, you're pretty protected. And that's background. So then I get over to this part here, and it's the other side of her face. And the problem I have with this is there's contamination in here. I can clean that up. But there's also, you see the edge on this side of her cheek over here. It's not as sharp as the one that's on the other side over here. This is really a focus issue is what this is all about. But I can clean this up anyway. So again, with my brush, make my brush a little bit larger. In this case, I'm going to make it a medium hardness. And I'm going to change it to overlay. So again, overlay will protect what you're painting. So if you hit the D key alone, no modifier, it'll default your foreground and background colors to black and white. You can see in my case, I've got white as my foreground color, but I'm going to come over here on her black face and I'm going to click and paint, and you'll see nothing happens. The overlay brush is protecting that. If I was in a normal blending mode and did that, it would paint. That's why I go to an overlay brush. It protects that. So Command Z to undo that. Back to an overlay brush. And now in this case, I want to clean this part up. I'm going to do one stroke across this and see what it does. If I feel like it's too aggressive, I'll just lower my flow. But I'm going to start right here. I don't want to hit her ear. I think that part's actually pretty good. It's this fuzziness that's actually happening on this edge. So I'm simply going to click and run this down. And lo and behold, I feel like that is actually giving me a much better edge on this. Now, it also lightened up part of her shirt collar. So typically when I do this kind of work, I will actually make things, I'll do the darker parts first and then the lighter parts. But in this case, I can still get it. So I'm gonna hit the X key to make black my foreground color, and I'm simply going to run that down that edge again right there. That part's taken care of. X key again to go back to my white is my foreground color. I'm also gonna go to my pasteboard right now because I can't get to this lower corner. So hit the F key once, and then you can get to the pasteboard. And then I'm just going to clean all this garbage out. And once you get the line in here, you could even try hitting this face a second time. So I'm going to try hit that a second time. That worries me a little bit. I'm going to undo that. Instead, I'm going to hit this with black. So I'm going to hit the X key to make black my foreground color. I just want a sharper edge along here. I feel like a little better than that. I'm probably going to go in and choke this thing anyway, but nonetheless, I think that'll give me a better start. Then I'm going to go back to a normal brush just to clean out the rest of this. Make sure it's a completely hard brush when you do this. 100% opacity, 100% flow, and then you, X key to paint with white, and you can get rid of all this crap that's back here and this part right in here. So then I hover over my image like this, and I'm just looking at my readout, the upper readout here, just to make sure I've got 255s. I do. I'm going to look at the lower corner over in here. Those are all 255s. That's all looking pretty clean. I don't like this. I think it's hair behind her right here. I don't like that, so I want to get rid of this. So again, B key, back to an overlay brush. And then I can just get rid of this. I also want to keep her, this is the highlight shadow on her face in front of her ear. I'm going to hit the X key again to go to black. I want that to actually be a part, as do I want this part of her ear to be a part of all of that. Then again, I'm just hovering on this outside. Oh, look at this. I'm hovering on the outside. I got a 254 somewhere in there, but that's hair. And then up in the upper corner. Yeah. As I start to move in, yeah, actually, this is actually a really good one. So that's how I would build my layer mask actually doing this. To see how it works, we are going to make a copy of our background layer, Command J. We're going to rename that Command J Channel Knockout. And I'm going to come back over to my channels palette. Right cheek temporary has done its job. I'm going to throw it away. So this is my channel knockout right here. If I use this, what part of my image is going to show and what's going to be hidden?
The background will show everything.
Exactly, right? Remember, black conceals, white reveals, right? So if I use this, I'm not going to see the girl. I'm just going to see the green background. So I'm going to invert this before I use it. Command I. Now, when I've got a white background on here, I mean, the girl is white, so she will show up, but the background will be under black and will be hidden. So to use this, hover over the icon of this, hold down the Command key, and click to load it as a selection. Come back over to the other side, and then add Layer Mask, the little square at the bottom of your Layers palette that has a circle in it. So it doesn't look like anything has changed. It's because we have got the exact same image right underneath it, so you would never see anything. I'm going to put a white layer in between the two. So select your background, copy, and then come down to Add Adjustment Layer. Again, the icon at the bottom of your Layers palette that's a circle, half black and half white. Click on it and come up to Solid Color. And then we just want to put it in a solid color. So in my case, it picks up my foreground color, but you'll notice that this tool actually is a color picker as well. So if you come over and actually select your background color, if it's white, mine is, it's just a fast way to load white is the color that you want to use on here, and click OK. And so this would be the first thing I would do to save my image. So up to the File menu, down to Save As. And I'm going to put this on my TOS folder, and I'm going to just make sure, I'm going to save it as a TIFF, either a TIFF or a PSD, a Photoshop file. It doesn't matter, they're functionally the same. So this is the first move I would make to do that. It looks pretty good, took me pretty long, but nonetheless looks pretty good. Again, I'm not going to remove the spill on this yet. We'll get to that a little bit later. So now I'm going to temporarily turn it off, and we're going to go after also the foreground color. We're going to go after the second method of doing this, and the second method of doing this was the color range tool. So make sure that you have your background selected and it's active, got everybody else turned off, and then up to the select menu down to color range. So when color range opens up, typically it will go after the foreground color. So my whole image looks like this preview, I'm going to temporarily change that by clicking on the selection preview at the bottom of the color range dialog box that opens up. I'm going to change it back to none. So you'll get the preview on the, you'll see it on the figure, on the color range dialog box, but you won't see it on the image. Once you get a selection started, then you can actually change that back to grayscale. So your image functions as a very large preview. It just works better. So with the sampled colors at the very top, that's what I'm going to use. I'm not going to pick the pre-canned greens. The problem with picking the greens is that is a predetermined range of green that's decided by Adobe. And this green may fall into it. Part of it probably does fall into it, but maybe not all of it. But if you use sample colors, you're actually just picking these colors direct. So if I click on the area of green on one side, you can actually see it's starting to pick up a sample. In my case, I'm going to change my fuzziness back up to 32, which is sort of the default area, the place most people start. So that's where I'm going to start with this. And then again, I can't really see the edge. I can't really see what's going on here too well. So that's when I'm going to click on my drop-down menu and say, show me grayscale. So you can see that when you get a grayscale that it's pretty chunky in this area that's sitting over here. But the thing that's happened is that we've only selected one color of green. Now, if I come over to the other side, to the left-hand side above her shoulder, and click over there, it'll give me a different color green. I want to sort of have all of these greens. So to do that, you click on the second, there's a series of eyedroppers in your color range dialog box that sit right under the word save. One of them is just a resampler. So every time you click on something, it'll give you a brand new selection. If you want to add to your selection, though, you go to the middle eyedropper. It's the eyedropper that has the little plus underneath it. You can click on it, and then this way, you can actually go around places and click other areas. And you can see, I just clicked in that upper right-hand corner, and it changed. It actually added to my selection. The beauty of this tool, though, is you can click and drag. So if you click and drag across this whole lower area, it will select a whole range of greens, and I can click and do the same thing in this area over here. If you overshoot your mark and you want to back this off, then you use the last of the eyedropper tools, the one that's got the minus on it. But in our case right now, we don't need that. What we need is more fuzziness. So what a fuzziness is going to do is, right now what we've said is that anything that is 32 tones lighter or 32 tones darker than the area that you selected, we're going to make as a part of this selection. So as I start to raise my fuzziness up, it's going to start reaching out further from the color that I picked originally. So in hopes it will build a larger selection. So I'm going to grab the fuzziness slider and just start to pull it towards the right, and you'll see it's starting to open up the areas where I'm really concerned, this transparent area part. This is what I'm concerned about, is getting this stuff right in here. So the thing is though, you can overshoot it. If you come up too high, you actually then really start to dig into the hair itself. You start to lose all the little fuzziness that is on the outside. So I'm going to back this back down a little bit to try to build in a little bit more tone in there. Yeah, and it just, I can tell you right now, I'm not going to be happy with this selection. It just isn't, it's too blunt of a tool. But nonetheless, we'll say okay to this. So I'm going to click OK. Now we've got a selection going. I'm going to save this selection. So go back up to the select menu, come down to save selection, and I'm going to call this color range knockout. And say OK. And then Command D to deselect. Now you'll notice when you save selections that they actually turn into channels. So this is an alpha channel now sitting at the very bottom, named color range selection. If I click on it, you can see what it looks like. If I wanted to work on this, I could come in here with an overlay brush. I can run levels on this. I can do all the tricks that I did for the other one. It's a little bit more complete, and again, I already told you I'm not really happy with the hair selection on this, so I'm not going to spend my time doing this. But again, it's an inverted mask right now in the channel, so I'm going to invert it so that it hides the background and shows the figure. So with it selected, Command I, And then I'm going to come back over to my background, and I'm going to make another copy of my background layer. Command J. I'm going to drag it all the way to the top. I'm going to double click on its name, and I'm going to rename this Color Range Knockout. And say OK. I'm going to go back over to my color range channel, alpha channel, hover over the icon, hold down the command key, click to load it as a selection, back over to the other side and add it as a layer mask. Turn on my background, solid color background, and you can see it's not the worst selection in the world. It's probably better than using the pen tool to try to select the hair. But if you, well, I'll show you a trick to be able to look at all three really quickly, because one of the problems we have in looking at when comparing layers like we're going to be doing here is it's really hard to turn one off and the other one on at the same time. It's impossible, actually. But you can do it as history snapshots, so we can go through them really quickly. However, we've got one more to make, and so I'm going to turn off the one I just made. I'm also going to turn off the green background. I'm going to make my copy of this one first and drag it all the way up to the top. So I've selected the background down at the bottom. Hold down the command key and hit the letter J to make a copy of it. Drag it all the way up to the very top. When it gets up to the top, double click on the name, and we're going to call this Zero Selective Color. Knockout. Okie dokie. Then I'm going to go to my Actions palette. Who in this room does not have a Zero Selective Color action? Okie dokie. You just need to find it and run it. So mine got found pretty quickly, so it built my hue saturation layer and my Zero Selective Color layer as well. I'm going to then go to my drop-down menu and come down to Greens and grab the black slider that's all the way at the bottom and take it all the way from the right side all the way over to the left-hand side. So that actually begins to give me the beginnings of a mask. But now again, the reason that this thing is not turning white and black, the reason my background did not just go white is because it's not a pure green. So I can use the hue saturation layer that is underneath this. So go ahead and click on your hue saturation layer that's underneath this to get to the hue saturation properties panel. In that panel, we're just going to make this green more saturated. So to do that, simply click on the targeting adjustment tool. That's the little hand that sits up at the very top with a finger that points left and right. Click on that and then come down on top of your image, and you need to just make sure you're clicking in a green area. So I'm going to do it on the lower right hand corner. I know that that's going to be the green area. If I click, hold down my mouse and drag to the right, it will saturate this green. If I go to the left, it will desaturate it. So again, I'm going to simply click on the right side and start to pull, and you'll see it has selected greens in my drop-down menu here, and it just shoved that saturation all the way over. So now I'm going to take a look at what that's looking like, and this one's actually a pretty good mask for me. Again, I told you on the very first time we did this, sometimes what will end up happening when you do this is that if you've got a lot of spill in the hair or a lot of spill on the side of an edge of an arm or clothes or any of that kind of stuff, when you do this saturation move, it can actually push that green into the white part of the mask, which is not what you want. So this is not a given that you select green and whack this thing out every single time. Sometimes you've got to back this saturation way off. In the case of the very first one that we did, we had to bring the saturation all the way back down to 0. We couldn't use it at all because it immediately took part of the girl's hair and made it part of the mask, and that's not going to work for us. But in this case, this seems actually pretty good here. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, I like this. Then to use this thing, we need to make a mask of it. We need to, or a channel of it that we can work with. Now, if you come over and look at your RGB channels, you can see that they look sort of all the same. But right now, we are viewing the RGB channel, and this is another one that gets tricky. Make sure now you've got your background, any of your background copy actually turned on. It just makes this part simpler. So instead of the adjustment layers that are at the very top. So I'm going to come down here. The RGB composite here is made up of these RGB. The RGB ones are all identical. Again, this is a black and white image by definition. Grayscale is equal levels of red, green, and blue, so there's no difference in these masks. So I'm just going to grab the blue one that is at the bottom and drag it down to the little square with the plus in the middle. It's going to make a copy of it. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to name it Zero Selective Knockout, or Zero Selective Color Knockout. Yes.
I tried using my action and I don't know what.
Did you get something that looks solarized?
No, it like turned everything black.
That's what you want.
Everything completely black.
You want everything black, and then you go to the drop-down menu in the Zero Selective Color and pick green and slide that all the way to the other side so that the green is white.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got some cleaning up to do. You can actually see there's a lot of contamination in this mask. It's a good beginning, but look at this big area right here. I mean, you can see all the contamination that's in this. So right now at this stage of the game, I've got a lot of color points. I've got 4 color readouts in here, and I don't need those. Those were all for using for other things. So I'm going to select my color sampler tool, and then up at the very top where it says clear all, I'm going to click on that. It will get rid of those points so that I can sort of start from scratch. So then I could actually try and use my color sampler point to get a point in this gray area that's sitting out here, or the gray area that's sitting here. I mean, I can try to do that. I'm looking at my readouts to try to find the darkest thing in here. So if you're lucky, you'll hit one of these points and it'll be right. If you're not, then you're off. You can also try amping up your sample size considerably. Bring your sample size up to a 31 by 31, and then let's hover over this and see what we get. Now, the readings that I'm getting now are considerably lighter than where I was before at my 3 by 3, but just realize that's what this whole samples thing is about. So anyway, but I'm going to go back to my 3 by 3. There's an area right up here, right under her ear, that actually seems like some of the darkest stuff right here that I want to have cleaned out. Yeah, I'm getting like a 163 there, so I'm going to drop a sampler point right there. Now, you could drop a sampler point in the middle of her face. I'll go ahead and do one. I doubt that is ever going to change, but we might as well. We'll see what happens. Then again, over in my readouts in my info palette, I'm going to click on my drop down and come down to RGB readout for my sample number 1 and RGB readout for my sample number 2. Remember, number 2 is her face. So I'm still working on this Zero Selective Color channel. Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. And I'm just going to grab the white point slider and start to pull it down towards the middle. And again, I'm watching my secondary readout. This is much easier to do than try to do this with a paintbrush. So I'm going to get close to that 250. I'm at a 251. I'm going to go to my arrow keys. And you'll see I didn't pick up any tone in the background, but you will see if you look really closely that I can see her eyeballs. I can see the highlights in her eyeballs. But what I'm really more concerned about right now is the quality of the hair texture that's up on the upper right-hand side. And when I look at this looks too aggressive. It's just torn apart all of that beautiful hair that was in there. So I'm going to eyeball this one now. I'm going to ignore my numbers. I'm just going to eyeball this. I'm going to start to back this off till I get some of that nice feathery hair part to come back in here, because that's the sign of a good mask. And so for me, this actually restored a lot of that part. Look at the difference in my screen really quickly. It was here to bring that back. Now I've also brought in contamination, but I can deal with that using a brush. So if you want the same as I've got, I had a 199 for my white point, and I'm going to go ahead and say okay. But I know I've got problems up here. I can see all the contamination that's sitting up here in the mask, so I'm going to go after all of that. The B key to get a brush, make sure that in this case it's a soft brush, and also an overlay brush, and leave your opacity and flow both at 100%. I'm going to back off so I can get this corner. I'm going to make for a much larger brush. I'm going to leverage the fact that the edge of my brush is soft. So I'm going to hit the X key to get white as my foreground color, and then you'll see areas. This is never going to be perfect. But what I want to do is some sort of compromise between cleaning up the contamination on this corner and still keeping hair. So I'm going to click and pull out My brush stayed down a little bit too long, so I'm going to undo that. Click and pull out, click and pull out. Now this upper corner now is reading 255. I lost a little bit of hair, but it's still good enough and believable. I'm going to come down and do the same thing on this other area that's down here. I'm going to go after that hair that I didn't ever like, that was on the girl side of the girl's face. I've got that very same trick that I need to do again on this other side of her face. Sorry. Make my brush a little bit smaller. Again, it's still an overlay brush. I'm going to do the darker one first to try to get the edge of her hair, of her face here a little bit sharper first. So X key to do that. Click and drag down. I'm also going to go after the shirt here. And then X key immediately to go back to white. And run this down here to get rid of all of that. That picked up a little of her collar again, so X key again to hit that with another black, X key again to get to white and clean all this garbage out. I need to zip back out. Her eyes now are actually, I can see them, so going back to a normal brush. X key to make black my foreground color, paint across her eyes. And this is going to be my zero selective color mask. So again, like all the other ones that I've done before, it's inverted, so I need to invert it back again. Command I. That will actually then invert it so that the mask shows the figure and hides the background. Control click on the command click on this to load it as a selection. Go back up to the very top. My two adjustment layers, that selective color layer, you can throw it away. You can throw the hue saturation one away as well. They've done their work. You don't need them. But I do have an active selection going. I've got my zero selective color knockout sitting up at the very top. Again, I'm going to simply add it as a layer mask. Then I'm going to go down and turn on my solid color adjustment layer and then take a look and see which one I like the best. So this is the one that I've got for zero selective color. So I'm going to come over to my history palette. So let's do this in order. We'll start in order. I'm going to turn off the zero selective color and go back and turn on the channel one. So this is the one that I did just using channels. So I'm going to come over to my history palette, and the little camera that's in the lower right hand corner will allow you to make a snapshot of what this image looks like right now. And what it looks like right now is with that channels knocked out layer on a white background. So I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to call it, again, you guys don't get the benefit of being able to name your snapshots because Adobe broke that. So if that's the case, go up to the top of your channels palette, and right up here at the very top, you will actually have this thing that says Snapshot 1, and you want to rename it Channels. Now when you do that, you're going to lose all of your history. You will see that all of your history has been grayed out. Before you do anything else, go all the way down to the bottom and click on Add Layer Mask, your last layer, so that you do not lose your history when you make history snapshots. So then I'm going to turn off the channel one, and I'm going to turn on the color range one and do the same thing again. Do a history snapshot, color range. Okay. In your case, you would have had to go all the way up to the very top, click on it. It also would be called Snapshot 1 because you'd already named the one before it. And then before you do anything else, come all the way back down and click on your Add Layer Mask again. And then finally, turn off that eyeball and turn on the zero selective color one and do one last snapshot. And call it Zero Select Color. And say OK to that. And then you can go up to the very top. I'm going to zoom out a little bit on my image so I can see what I'm really concerned about is the quality of the hair and the spill. So I'm going to keep my image up about like this. That looks pretty good. And then just go through your snapshots up at the very top. So this was channels right here. And this was color range. Well, color range just butchers it, so I'm not using that. And then zero selective color. So it's between zero selective color and channels. You can actually throw history states away. So I'm going to throw my color range one away because it's no good. And then I can just go back and forth between channels and color range. Zero selective color and channels And so I am much happier with the zero selective color. Did a much, much, much better job. So this is the one that I'm actually going to use to start my next process. Does this make sense to everyone? So now would be a good time to save your work. So again, up to the file menu, down to save. If you've already saved it once, you don't need to do another save as. So then I'm going to remove the spill from this, and we are almost done with this. So to remove the spill, again, I'm going to be working on this zero selective color on the pixel layer. So make sure you select the pixel layer so that the white border's around the pixel content, not around the mask. I've still got my white background on, which is what I do want on. And then I want to look at the edges of this. Before I actually remove the spill, I want to make sure that I don't need to choke this thing. And it does look like I might need to choke this thing a little bit. I don't really like this part that's going right along this edge right here of her neck. So I can try to do this with an overlay brush. Remember now that the mask that we have on here, if you hold down your option key and click on it, you can see it. It's this garbage right here. This is what's going on. Now, I might be able to hit that with an overlay brush. We're going to try right now. You can watch this happen in real time. So I'm going to click on my image again and the mask again to get back to it. Hit the B key to get an overlay brush. Check to make sure it is an overlay brush. And in this case, I want to hide this area. I want this area here to be background. I don't want this to be skin. So that means I want to paint with black. Black is my foreground color. I'm good to go. So I'm just going to work on this area of her neck, and I'm simply going to click and run this down. I'm going to hit it again, and I'm going to hit it again. And I don't feel like I'm really getting this. I mean, I feel like it's getting a little bit better, but it's still really rough in here. So I'm going to give up on that, and instead I'm going to clean this out. Let me look at the collar really quickly, and then I'll let you know what I'm going to do. Yeah, guys, to be perfectly honest with me, I'm not going to choke and spread this thing. I'm actually going to use the pen tool to clean this out. So really quickly, the P key to get the pen tool, and we're going to stay as close to the edge as we can. Again, no straight lines. Make sure you're putting something in here that's organic. You don't need to get rid of your second point if you don't have to. Although when I come down to this very edge down here, I'm pretty much going to have to. I'm also going to do it for the collar. And come all the way back up and close your path. I go to your path palette, and I would name this. Double click on the work path and call it left cheek. And say OK. And then again, command click on this path to load it as a selection. Now in this, we need to feather this, because again, I know that edge there, it can't be as sharp as this path is. So I know I've got to feather this thing. So up to the select menu, and then I'm going to come down to modify and feather. And I'm going to hit this with a 2 pixel feather. It needs to be pretty soft, and I'm going to say OK on that. So the issue that I've got now, though, if we take a look at this, go back to your layer mask, hold down your option key and click on it so you can see it. I've got a selection that's going on in the middle part right here, but I'm trying to get rid of this jagged edge part that's on the outside of it. Right now, if I try to paint with something, we'll try it. Hit the B key to get a brush tool. Make sure it is a normal brush. 100% opacity, 100% flow. In this case, I'm also going to make it a medium hardness. You'll see that if you want to try to paint with this, again, black is my foreground color. I can only paint inside this selection. Remember, the selection controls where I can paint. So this is not where I want to paint. I want to do the exact opposite of this. So hit Command Z to undo this. Instead, we are going to invert the selection. So up to the select menu, down to inverse. Now the exact opposite has happened. It doesn't look like it because you can't see the edges of my image, but if you zip back out, you'll see now in the edges of your image, you've got marching ants going around the entire image. And now if you were to paint on this, the area that's inside here is protected. So again, black is my foreground color. If I try to paint in here, I get nothing, but when I paint on the outside, this is what I get. So Command Z to undo that, and then I'm just going to hit this edge right here to clean it up. And it does give me a kind of a soft edge. I like that part, so that part's worked out well for me. So that's just how I'm going to fix mine. Command D to deselect, and then let's see how we did. So I'm feeling much better about that edge now than I did before. So then it's just a question of removing spill now. So again, I'm working on my pixel image. I hit the B key to get a brush. Make sure it is a soft brush, completely soft. Change its blending mode from normal down to color. And then we're going to go after the hair first. So I'm going to go up to the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to zoom back out a little bit. Make my brush larger. And then I'm going to sample the color of her hair. So I'm just hovering over the brown part of her hair, holding down my Option key to temporarily get the color picker and click once. It gives me a brown. And again, because I'm on the pasteboard, I can actually get outside of the edge of this. You do not want to paint on any of this hair that's not broken. You only want to hit the parts that's got the green in it. So I'm going to make my brush even smaller, and I'm just going to paint across that. Now in that case, it looks like I've still got a hard brush, but I don't. I can spot that red right here. That looks out of place to me. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and instead I'm going to drop my flow down. So I'm going to crank my flow down to like 2 or 3%, somewhere in there, and then I can scrub on this, and it'll just bring it in slowly. And so I'm going to continue to work my way around. I'm going to up my flow just a little bit more, so more like a 5 or a 6. Resample all along the way, guys. Otherwise, you don't want to do all of your spill removal in one single color. It looks fake. So again, Option delete and go after a lot of other color in here. Remember, if the color is screwed up or it doesn't work, you just pick the right color and paint over it. When you get down near the ear, you want to make sure that you go to a completely hard brush, so that you don't run the risk of painting on her skin, and you zoom in as well. Then I've got the spill that's on her ear is actually her skin tone, so do not use hair tone to sample that. And the same thing that's running down the side of her face, that's all glow that's coming from the background. You need to get rid of all that. Again, I'm not really happy with the skin tone on her neck that I just did that on. Her neck is a different color than her face, and I used the same color from her face on her neck. You can see it a million miles away. Command Z to undo that. Sample her neck color, and then get rid of that part. Much better. And then we need to hit the other side, so sample the collar. And I think I've got some spill even on this area that I knocked out, so I'm just going to go after this with that color. I'm going to go ahead and crank my flow all the way back up again because it needs this all. And then around her ear. And then again, I'm back to sampling hair color, so I'm going to go for something sort of a darkish brown to get rid of this. Make sure that you are back to a completely hard brush. I am, so that I can go around this line of her ear. And much bigger brush. And then just clean out the rest of the resample, smaller brush, and drag my flow back down again. I like the way that was working. Resample. Boom. Save your work. So this is going to be our starting point to do the rest of the work that we do today. However, the problem that I've got with this is that when we go to do our split frequency work, when you actually get into it, and again, this is one of those sort of circular things. I can't really explain to you what it is until I talk about this first. So it's chicken and egg kind of thing here about, talking to you about what we need to have ready for split frequency work when you don't know what split frequency work is yet. So just understand that when we're doing this kind of work, that my first off of this is to create a new complete version. Once you start doing your split frequency work, you can separate it after the fact. You could do the knockout after the fact, but we've already done it here in the beginning. So I'm going to just go ahead and create a new version for this. However, I've got one problem. And the problem that I have with this is that the mask that is controlling this layer right here is the layer mask, but it is not the same as the one that made it, is it? Remember, I did this zero selective color, right? And I put it on as a mask, but then didn't I change the mask using the pen tool? I did. So this mask that I've got called zero selective color in my channels is not the same as this one that's over here. So go over to your channels palette. You'll see you'll have two of them. I'm going to pull my channels palette out so that you can really see this. I've got two of them that have zero selective color, but one of them is the zero selective color knockout mask. That's what is on this layer right here. The other is the zero selective color that I used to make this, but then I did pen work and some brush work on this one that is not on this zero selective color one, correct? So take the original zero selective color one and throw it away, and then take the zero selective color mask that you can see right now because you've got this image, this layer is selective. If you don't have this image of this layer selective, like I'm going to go down to the one right underneath it, you'll see it's a different mask. This thing temporarily only shows up by what you have selected. So I'm going to go back up to this one where I've got that zero selective color mask, and I'm simply going to drag that down on top of my little plus. I'm going to double click on this and say, nope, I don't want you to call that mask or copy. I just want it called knockout. And now I'm safe. I'm good to go. So I'm going to come back over to my image up under my layers palette. I'm going to reset my workspace so that you can see it. And so I need to create a new version of this. So the easiest way to do this and still keep all of this stuff that we've got going here without jeopardizing any of that, you're going to use this keyboard shortcut all the time. We may have used it a little bit in this class already. It is Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. If you do that, it will create a merge stamp version of everything that was visible. This was the two things that were visible were the figure and then the white background. You would then double click on this name and call it new version. So have you selected the top layer?
Yeah, the zero selective color.
Yeah, and then hold down. Do you have a selection going? Hit Command D to make sure you don't. Okay, then hold down the Command key, the Option key, the Shift key, and hit the letter E.
It's doing something else.
Let's get rid of that, so just throw that away because you don't need that. Good, and then top one selected, so again, Command D to make sure you don't have anything selected, Command Option Shift letter E, and that's the stamp.
Okay.
So, is everybody this far? So you're going to be really happy about this because this is the beginning of your homework, because otherwise you're going to have to do this, and you don't. Yay. Okay, save your work. I've got 2:15. That would be a good time for a quick 10, a hard 10. Be back at 2:25. All right, I need you to take a look at my screen. Just yeah, take a look at my screen here for just 1 second. We need to talk about frequency. So if you take a look at this little diagram up here, there is high frequency, which you can see it's just they're graphing something. They're graphing a set of numbers on some sort of graph line. So it could be a million things. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's just that you can see there's a lot of rapid changing that's happened up here at the very top. And then in low frequency, it's much, much, much less chaotic. It's much more sort of soft and even and that kind of stuff. So frequency applies to all sorts of things. It applies to tonal range and sound. It applies to, anyway, it applies to this cornucopia of things. But what we are going to leverage is what they call spatial frequency. So it's a little bit hard to get your head around this, but the minute we start working with this, this will begin to make sense. So I'm just trying to introduce this to you. The reason they call this split frequency is that we are going to do this split to an image. We are going to separate the high frequency content of an image and the low frequency content of an image onto separate layers that will then allow us to work independent of one another. And there's massive advantages to being able to do that in when you're doing your retouching in Photoshop. So that's basically where we're going with this. So to do that, if you take a look, we are in class 7 now. So in your class 7 folder, in the student class 7 part, there is a split frequency retouching folder. If you can open that up. And inside that, there's a couple of things that I want to point out to you. So again, I've already pointed these out to you. They're the PDFs that are in here. You should definitely copy these PDFs down, save them. Even people who do split frequency work a lot sometimes forget it. Setting it up can get a little bit tricky, so I'm going to show you how to do it correctly and anyway, all that. But to start with, just to explain what's going on in here, is that this ultimate guide to frequency separation technique, this is just a thing. You guys don't have these files? Oh, well, they're not in your student folder? Does anybody else have these files? Oh, sure.
Sorry.
Make me look like a, no. So at any rate, this is a guide. It'll simply walk you through everything. It gets a little bit deeper into frequency and all that kind of stuff. But what's important in this guide is, do me a favor, go ahead and open up the guide, the ultimate guide to frequency separation technique. Because I need to point out there's 2 recipes in here. So until you've been doing this a lot, you will not remember these recipes. So I'm just going to show you. If we go down to page, whatever the hell page this is, page 4. In page 4, you will see 2 dialog boxes. It's an apply image dialog box, and it's how you actually set this up. You'll see why this is in a second why. But there's 2 different recipes. One is if you're working in 8-bit color, and the other is if you're working in 16-bit color. Again, the way this dialog box is set up is completely different. The only reason I'm pointing this out is that as you start doing this work, you might even want to shoot a picture of this on your phone so you don't have to come find this thing every single time you want to use it. But until you get really used to the setup that we're doing here to do the split itself, these recipes, you're going to have to find these recipes. So I just wanted to point that part out. And the other 2 PDFs that are in here, there is a setup. You'll never see this. But this is the way that I work. I can't say you'll never see this. You'll rarely see this, but it's a way to set up so that you can continue to work non-destructively in your split frequency work. This is an added PDF. It's only 1 page long, so you don't need to worry about that part. There is a high pass frequency separation technique. This is, I'm going to show it to you as well. This starts from a different perspective on how to do it. Again, this will all make sense in just a minute. And then finally, there is a mixer brush settings for retouching in Photoshop. We do a lot of stuff in split frequency using the mixer brush. How many people in here have ever used the mixer brush? Yeah, well, this is going to be a revelation. So you'll like this. Anyway, so that's the PDFs that are in there, and we're going to talk about that part. Then also in there is a folder for frequency separation images. If you'll select on that one, let's see which one we want to start with. Yeah, the one that I'm going to start with is the split frequency retouch image.psd. If you could launch that guy. I'm going to get off of my pasteboard right now. So I'm going to hit the F key once to go to the black pasteboard, F key again to go back to the stoplights, and I am going to get rid of this image right now. We're not going to work on this guy yet right now. I'm just going to close. Well, you know, I take that back. Why don't we work on this one right now? That would just be more of your homework, wouldn't it? Let's do this. Go ahead and close that up. Save it, obviously, and close that up, and we can come back to it. Because for some of you, if you haven't actually done the new version, if you haven't completely built it yet, we don't want to start doing all of this retouching on it, because the minute you change the new version, all the retouching that you do will essentially become invalid. So I'm going to zoom in tight to this girl's face. And you can see we've got challenges in here. So I've got like a pimple that's right down on her chin. I've got, I'm not sure, this is sort of like a light freckle that's up underneath her nose. There's flaky skin around her nose, but there's also sort of like, she doesn't have a mustache. She has just a little peach fuzz that are sitting on the side of her lip. She does have some good skin texture. She's got some bad skin texture. All of that part's going on in here. So we are going to, well, let me ask you this first. A quick aside. How's the tonal retouching part? I know. So there's two kinds of people in the world. There's people who love that shit, and there's people who hate it. And there is nothing in between. You either, oh my God, I can't wait to do that again, or if I ever have to do that again, I'm going to hunt somebody down and hurt them. All right? So anyway, but you remember, when we very first started doing this retouching, when looking at tools and that kind of stuff, at the very, very, very beginning of this, we started talking about how the method that you use to retouch really has to match the intent. So again, if you're shooting a lot of full figure fashion and it's really more about the clothes and it's small prints and it's not going to be whatever, you can be really pretty cavalier about it. You can go in with a healing brush tool and whack around on the face, and you don't really worry, because you're not in like this, right? You're not in this close like this. But if you get the $20,000 job retouching Rachel Weisz for L'Oreal, then tonal retouching is your go-to, right? So those are the two extremes. So for me, frequency separation falls in the middle. So what's going to happen here is that we're going to use a lot of the things that we were doing in tonal retouching, but we're doing it in a bigger scale and a little bit, and it's just, well, you'll see. So anyway, that's all I'm trying to point out, is that when we do this kind of work, it's going to be, again, for me, this is my go-to in the beginning, unless I'm really doing super high-end beauty retouching. And if super high-end beauty retouching, a lot of times I'll start here. It ends up being a combination of this and tonal work as well. So anyway, that's where we're at. So our job here to begin with is to actually split this image, but there's a couple of things on here. Again, this is another one of those circular things that you're not really going to understand until we actually do the split. And I want to do the split. So anyway, I'm just going to tell you first here, we need to do a little touch-up work on this first, because what's going to happen is that when I do this split, I'm going to try to get all of the detail of the texture, the detail, all of that on a texture detail level, and then I'm going to leave all tone and color on a separate layer. So tone and color is considered low frequency, texture, detail is all considered high frequency. However, there's some things that end up being in both places, and like this pimple right down here on the bottom of her chin is going to wind up in both places. So even though I hate doing a lot of this, I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be easier for us to go ahead and get rid of this thing first, and then do our split afterwards. So to do that, I am going to start right now, so please do this with me. I'm going to make a new copy of my background layer, Command J. If you got a smart object, all of this work that we do, guys, you cannot do on smart objects, because again, this is all destructive work that we're doing here. So that's not to say that you shouldn't have smart objects as your bases and as your virgins, but that's not the case for this right now. And there's no reason to turn this into a smart object right now. So with this first one done, I'm going to double click on it. I'm just going to call it New Virgin. And then the first thing I'm going to go after, again, is that pimple that's right on her lower cheek. So for me, there's a number of tools to do it. I actually think that the patch tool is the best tool for this kind of work. So that's the tool that I'm going to grab. So again, it's in the spot healing group. If you come over and come all the way down to the patch tool, the way this tool works is that you actually circle it around the thing that you want to fix, and then you drag it to an area of that you want to use to actually replace that part. Now, I'm going to circle mine, and then I'm going to show you guys. We need to have a conversation about where we're going to replace this. So if I click this and I bring my lasso tool around it, you'll see that you get the marching ants, and then if you hover your cursor in the middle, it gives you that patch icon with an arrow that's pointing up and down or left and right. So that's just an indication that you need to move this to some new place to grab the texture. Remember, all of these tools, they replace, it's a two-step process. They replace texture first, and then they look at the surrounding area, at the tone and the color of the surrounding area, and they try to blend this new patch with the surrounding color. That's the two-step process. So if you look at my screen here really quickly, if I click and I drag over on this side is in much more light and it has no texture at all. So if I use this area over here, it's going to give you this big ass dot in the middle of her face that is completely flat and void of texture, and that is not going to match. If I go to the other side that's over here, I run into a similar problem. It's actually got more texture. The only place that I can go, because this light is coming from right to left, is right down below. So you're just going to bring this right down below and let go. Command D to deselect. So there's some stuff around it now that I'm not really all that crazy and happy about with, but that stuff I can fix in split frequency work. So that's going to just be my first job here on fixing this right here. So to see if there's other areas that you feel like you should fix, if you hate a model, or you hate one of your friends, or if you hate anybody, do this trick. So we need to really accentuate and bring out the plot, whether you call it blemishes, pimples, whatever, the big heavy stuff that we need to fix. The way to see it the easiest, I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit, is we're going to add a black and white layer on top of this. So come over to your adjustment layers, and we're going to add black and white on top of this. It'll open up, and you're going to take the red slider and you're going to take it to the left, and you'll start to really darken her face. And then you can take the yellow slider and push it to the right to open things up if her face gets too dark. But we're going to zip in here. I'm going to kick out just a little bit. I'm really going to crank those reds all the way down and then push those yellows up a little bit so I can see just a little bit more of her face. So this now will actually point out the things where she might actually need some serious work. So you can see there's a couple of spots on the left part of her cheek over in here. I think I would go ahead and clean those guys up as well. Also, that I don't want to call it a mole. I'm going to leave that one just so that when we do the split, I can show you that it ends up in both layers. Now, all of the work that we're doing, we could do using split frequency. It just means that stuff that's complicated like this, parts of it will wind up in both layers, and you have to then do it in both layers. So this is just a way to not do that. So anyway, I'm going to go back down to my new virgin. I'm still going to use the patch tool and on this new virgin layer, and I'm simply going to fix a couple of these things that are much darker. So again, remember, you're trying to track skin tone, skin grain, and focus especially. Do not start pulling something from way out left field. And that part looks pretty good. Small place up on the top of her forehead. Again, do not fix that little mole. I want you to keep that, but you can fix the ones that are on the very side edge of her face. If you were to use other healing tools, which you can use, but let's say, for instance, go to the healing brush tool. When you go to the healing brush tool, you will see that you've actually got a layer set of drop downs here. You want to make sure that this set is set to current layer only. And the reason you want to do that is you don't want to mix anything in with this. Specifically, you don't want to mix this black and white content into this new virgin part. So it's not a ton of work that I'm doing here. I'm actually going to go after a little bit more on her chin. So click on it 1 second. You need hit source, not destination. Yeah, guys, when you're working with the patch tool, make sure that you hit source first. You can reverse that process where you would select a destination and drag it over, but everybody's used to really doing more of the source part. All right, so I'm just going to get a little bit more out of this for a second. And then I feel pretty good to go in here. Yeah, I'm going to leave this stuff down on her chin where it is as well. So that's going to be all the work that I do. I'm going to throw away my black and white layer. At this stage of the game, I am going to save my work. Make sure Photoshop file and that you're embedding your color profile. Okay, so now we're going to do the split. So to do the split, there's 2 different methods of doing this. I'm going to show you the most common one first, and then I'm going to show you an alternate, and it just kind of depends on how you like to work. So to do the split, we do 2 layers, 2 copies of this new version. So Command J to give 2 copies of it. You're going to go to the first copy, double click on it, and you're going to rename this low. And then you're going to double click on the top copy, and you're going to rename it high. You can actually make an action to do this exact work. H-I-G-H. All right, and then I'm going to ask you to come into her face. I'm going to come into her eye right here at about 300%, 200% to 300% in here. You need to really be able to see. This is the detail. You need to see this part really closely. So in your layer stack right now, turn off the eyeball for the high layer and select the low layer. So, and actually rename it low, not low-e. Okay, so we need to blur this thing to remove the high frequency. We need to remove the texture and the detail. So to do that, you come up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. And mine comes in, I had a 3 on mine. I'm going to actually drag mine all the way down to start it down at a 0.1. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to start to drag this up, the value of this up, to the point that we can no longer see skin texture. That's going to be the first thing I go after. So all of this skin texture that's underneath here, I want to lose all of that. You don't want to crank this thing up any higher than you have to, because what will happen is you'll start actually contaminating your high layer or your low layer with the opposite. So what we're looking for is a clean split in this. So anyway, I'm going to start to drag it up, and again, I'm just watching what happens, and I get up to around a 3, and I'm losing the skin texture pretty well in here. So I'm going to continue that up, and then I'm going to take it up to a 4. And again, as part of this is just it's like gut feeling. So then I'm going to take a look around this and say, do I like this? Do I feel like I'm losing? So what I'm looking to keep is tone and color. So I'm keeping all of that, but you can see, for instance, right here, I don't see her eyelashes anymore. Those are pretty much gone. I don't see any of the skin texture. If I take a look up at the hair, you see there's wave of tone and color, but there's no real texture in it. If you undo your check mark, you'll see that's texture. This is not. I'm going to back this back down to a 3 again and just see if I feel like that's strong enough to do what I'm hoping it'll do. And I feel like when I bring it down to a 3 that I'm resuming, I'm bringing texture back in. Look at the side of her face right in here. So I'm going to go back up to that 4. I feel better there. Yeah, that it just feels smoother here. And I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. So if you take a look at this, this is now the low texture of the image. So this is color and this is tone, but what's missing in this is texture and detail. That's going to be on the high layer. And so this is how we do it. Go ahead and select the high layer, make it active, turn it on so that the eyeball on it actually shows so you can see it. Make sure it is selected. And then we're going to go to some place that most of you have never been. Anybody in this room ever use Apply Image? So even those people who said they've done split frequency work, I don't know how you do it unless you use Apply Image, but anyway. So to get to Apply Image, it's up in the Image menu. Click on the drop-down menu, and you're going to come down to Apply Image. It's 2/3 of the way down. So take a look at my screen to see where it is. Image menu, down, Apply Image. And a dialog box will actually open up. This dialog box, it remains sticky through a session, but then it resets to this every single time you quit Photoshop and launch it again. So to go through this is, again, the recipes that I showed you in that ultimate frequency guide, separation guide, will give you this recipe. So this is an 8-bit image. You know it's an 8-bit image because of this little 8 that's sitting right up here. So these are the settings that you would use for an 8-bit image, not a 16-bit image. So if you're working in 16-bit, I'm not sure why, but if you are, great. You can't use this recipe. You've got to use the other one. So, but for us, 8-bit image, so this is what you're going to do. In the layer drop down, at the very top, you've got source. You can actually source from multiple images. So if you have 2 or 3 images open, you could pick a different image to actually do this work. There'd be no real reason to do that, but you could. But at any rate, in the layer drop-down menu, you're going to click on this and you're going to come down to low. So the layer that we want to work with is the low layer. And then in the blending mode, click on that drop-down menu and come down to subtract. So what's happening right now, and then finally the 3 last things that you need to make sure are intact. Opacity should be at 100%, scale should be 2, and the offset should be 128. Invert should not be selected. And your image should look gray like this. That's what you should actually see on it. So what we have just done in this whole process, yes?
What if our image is black?
It's your offset.
Offset 128. So you need to understand what we have done here, what's actually happening here. So this image, the high image, was a complete version. It had both high and low frequencies in it. We built the blurred layer underneath it, which got rid of all of the high frequency stuff. Now what we are doing is we are taking that low frequency image, the blurred image, the one that was down here, and we are subtracting all of that information from this complete layer, from the high layer that had both of them in it. And what we end up with left is the high frequency. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's run that again. The low frequency, I'm going to cancel all of this. You don't need to do this. You can stay right where you are. The low frequency image right here, this has got only low frequencies in it. It has no texture and detail in it. It's got all the tone and the color in it. It's all there. This one up at the top has got everything in it. It's got all the low and all the high. It's got them both. So what I'm going to do with that Apply Image dialog box is I am going to subtract all of this low information from this complete set, and what will be left will be the high frequency. Does that make sense now? We good on that? All right. So really quickly, image, make sure again I'm on the high layer, image, apply image. And we're going to subtract the low from this layer. So I'm just subtracting the low. The offset and the 2 are to basically set the majority of this image to a middle gray, and in that middle gray, because we're going to change the blending mode of this, the majority of this will disappear, and all you'll end up with left is actually the texture. So I'm going to go ahead. So everybody has an image that looks this. It should look like a high pass filter version of an image, right? Go ahead and say okay. Then we need to change the blending mode of this layer from normal down to linear light. And if you've done this split correctly, your image should look exactly the way it does, the way it started. So to check to make sure that this did work, hold down your Shift key and select the low layer. So now I've got both the high and the low layer are both selected. Come up to the little hamburger to the right of your layers palette, click on this drop down and say you want to do a new group from layers. And a dialog box will open up, and just type in FS. I typically do it in caps, and say OK. So all that did was it added a group are the folders that just hold layers. And you can see mine's called FS. If you click the little drop down triangle and open it up, you can see that the high and the low layer are both in there. But the reason you do this is that you now want to turn the eyeball of your FS group on and off. And if you see any change at all, you've done it wrong. So this is a great way to check. Are we good on this part? So does everybody have this, or is anybody not? Because you're not going to be able to do any work for the whole rest of the day if you don't have this. So don't be shy. Say, nope, I don't have that. Okay, so that's exactly what you want. So now you're going to change the blending mode of this layer. So blending mode from normal down to linear light.
When you did the linear light.
Keep going.
Linear light for that one.
Linear light right there. Perfect. Hold on your Shift key and click on low. Go to your hamburger. Say new group from layers. Nope, that's you want the layers in it.
It's at the class.
Oh, yeah, sure. And FS. It's okay. And then turn that eyeball on and off on the group. And if you see changes, it's wrong. Okay, so they're both selected, right? Okay, then come up to the hamburger. Layers.
So he's like, turn it on and off. You did it wrong. So he's just like, when you turn it on.
Turn the eyeball on that on and off.
Like, can I see it?
Yeah, that means it's right.
Please.
Yeah, hang on. Hold on one second, guys. I'm going to pause the video and we'll get around and make sure.
When you made that layer, did you use the one where you used the patch to? Or did you make a new layer?
So this is a great start, and we can actually start to work here. However, the problem that I have starting to work like this is that the moves that we're going to do now on both of these layers is going to be destructive. And if something goes wrong, I can save this work. They're layers. They'll save with this. I could open this up in a year from now. But if I open this up in a year from now and I say, wow, I'd really like to continue to do some work on this, I don't know what my split was. I don't know if I have to redo the split. I don't know what my values were. So,
I don't think it's very good.
oh, I am, yeah. Yeah, thanks. So I do safeties for this so that I sort of keep versions of my split so that I then have something that I can use to retouch. So I'll show you how I do this. So the first one that you're going to do is go ahead and select your low layer, and then just hit Command J, and you've done everything you need to do. So now we have a low copy, and we're going to do all of our work on the low copy. If we fuck something up in the low copy, we've got the original low underneath it, and I can go grab material from that and actually bring it into the one that I screwed up on the top. Does that make sense? So it's still that same version with a layer that's on top that I can change, right? That's the same idea. So in this one, that part's easy. In the high one, it gets a little trickier. So on the high one, click on that, and again, hit Command J. We're going to make a copy of it. But you see that the girl gets really hyper contrasty when you do that. So we need to change a couple of things to make this work with the high copy. So the first thing is that we need to change the blending mode on this high copy from linear light back to normal, and it'll look like this. And then we need to clip this layer to the one underneath it. Have we done any clipping layers in this class yet? Okay, so what a clipping layer is basically what it means is that, well, here, I'm going to show you really quick. Everybody, let's just create a quick synthetic image. So Command N, just to bring up a brand new dialog box. Oh, that's a little image. So hang on one second. Let's do that again. Command N, yeah, I'm going to do inches, and I'm going to do an 8x10 and at 300 pixels per inch. Just something that it doesn't really matter that much, but something a little bit bigger. Okay, so I am going to create a new blank layer up on top of this, and I'm going to hit the D key to default my foreground colors to black and white. Black is my foreground color, so Option Delete will fill it with black. So I've got a black image that's actually going here. And then I'm going to actually grab the marquee tool, and I'm just going to click and pull a selection out. I don't care what it is, and I'm going to add this as a layer mask. So you can see with the layer mask, it's letting part of that black show through, and then the part of the black is showing, the rest is being hidden, and the white is actually showing through. Masking 101. Did this work for everyone? Yep, we good? Okay, I'm gonna add another blank layer on top of this, and then the blank layer on top of this, I want to fill it with red. So I'm gonna click on my foreground color, and again, type in a 255 for my R value, 0 green, 0 blue, and say okay. And then I'm going to fill this layer with red. Again, red is my foreground color, Option Delete fills it with red. So this is completely showing red. But if I wanted to actually clip this, what they call clipping, what I can do is when you clip a layer, it's actually then inherits the mask that's underneath it. So to do this, watch my screen really quickly to see it, and then I'll make sure that you can understand how to do it. You hover your cursor right between those two layers, right between the black one and the red one. You hold down your Option key, and you will see your cursor changes into a little square with a counterclockwise arrow kicking out of it. If you click on that, what ends up happening is that entire layer shifts over to the right. You'll see that you get this little arrow that points down, but you'll also notice that it is now inherited the mask. I don't see the black anymore because the red is covering it, but the red is also being masked by that mask. That's why I still see the white background. Does that make sense, what's going on here? Yes?
I guess to think about it this way, like, that's, like, if you're stacking a piece of paper, like, would it be, when you clip it, you're allowing the layer on top to be seen through?
No, because if I was seeing through this, this would be seeing through it. Or they would be a mix if it was somehow transparent. It's not. This thing is just handling the clipping layer part of it, right? So here, let's do this. Go to your to the image that we've actually got, and I'm going to say this new version that we've got. Grab the new version layer and drag it on top of this thing that we just built, and hold down the Shift key and let it come in. It's going to give you warnings about converting, all that stuff. You don't need to worry about any of that. Just say yes, okay, 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 okay. So now I've got my image is actually sitting in this same group, and it's huge. It's covering everything, right? I can continue to clip. If you hover now again between the new version copy and the red layer, hold down your Option key, you'll get that same weird little icon, click on it, this is now being clipped as well. To unclip it, you do the same, you just do it in reverse. You hold down your Option key and you click, and you'll see now that with the Option key, because they are clipped, that you get this slash that goes through that little arrow. That's just saying you're unclipping it, and it goes back. If you clip it here and then you unclip the one underneath it, you lose it for both. So all this is doing is it's saying, I want to inherit the mask that's underneath it. That's all we're doing. So you could, conceivably, you could do this. You could, this is the reason that you don't want to do this stuff. I'm going to command click to load this as a selection, and I'm going to make this as a mask there, and then I'm going to command click to load that as a selection and add it as a mask here. So now I've got 3 masks that are all identical. But now let's say I want to change one just a little bit. I got to go change all 3. There's no reason to do that. If you get rid of these masks and delete them, don't apply them. And then I'm going to clip, again, the red. And I'm going to clip the other one and turn it on. Now if I go into this mask layer itself and hit the B key, I'm going to hit a brush and make it a larger brush. And see what my foreground color is. Hit the X key to make white my foreground color. And go back onto this where I'm actually painting on my layer mask. I can continue to paint out here. And it's masking that because that's what's happening to this mask right here. Hit the X key and do the opposite. Is this making sense? So that's what clipping is all about. You can close that up. You don't need to save that. But in order to get this protective high frequency copy to work, again, you change its blending mode to normal, and then we need to clip this to the one underneath it because it not only will inherit masks, it'll inherit blending modes as well. So hover between high copy and high, hold down the option key and click, and this image will now, again, look like it always looked. Does that make sense? At this stage of the game, save your work.
Use the option key and then
You hold down the option key and click between the 2 layers, and it should pop over. And if you want to unclip it, you undo that part. Okay, so has everybody got this part? Are we good to go on this? All right, I need to, everyone, we good? Okay, zoom into her upper lip. So the trick about doing split frequency work is that if we were to try to get rid of the little peach fuzz on the side of her face right now, if I use the clone stamp tool, which I could use, the problem is that wherever I source this from, it's going to take the lighting as well as the texture and put it on here. I don't want that to happen. So for instance, if I were going to work from, let me grab a clone stamp tool, a smaller one. So if I were to grab this area, look at the face that I'm working with right here. So let me zip back out just a little bit. If I were trying to get rid of this, you can see that this is actually, that her mouth has dimension, right? This is part of her teeth are back behind that. So I've got light that's coming from my right side to my left side. This is going off into shadow, but it's also this area that's underneath her nose is further away from my camera. It's deeper in. As is this area that's over here. This area over here does not have the same shadowing that this area does. So if I use the clone stamp tool or healing brush tool, either one, to try to get this thing, it won't work because I'm not only bringing the texture with it, which would work, but I'm also bringing the color and tone with it, which will not work. The color and tone of this side of her face essentially cannot be touched. Otherwise, it doesn't look like she has got a mouth that has dimension. You're just going to flatten this out. Does that make sense? All right, so we are going to start working on just the high layer. My suggestion to you is you can do this watching the entire image, but most people, myself included, tend to work on the high and low layers separate from one another. And so to do that, what I want you to do is just turn off the low copy and actually turn off everything that's underneath it. And you've just got this one layer is visible. So I've got both of my high layers are visible right here, and you can sort of see what I'm talking about now. If you zoom into that area where you can actually see the peach fuzz above her lip, do you see any tone or color in here? No, you have got nothing but this gray and then the texture part. So what we are going to do is leverage that, and I'm going to continue to work with my patch tool. I think it's a good tool to use here. I'll also show you how to use the healing brush tool and the settings that we should use here. But I'm going to start with the patch tool first. I think it does a really good job of this. And I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to, again, you don't want to change things that you don't need to change, but I'm going to circle this little bit of hair that's right underneath her lip right here. And I'm simply then going to drag straight to the side to replace that texture. I don't want to get rid of the texture, I want to get rid of the hair. So I'm stealing texture that doesn't have hair in it. So that worked really well right there. Command D to deselect. I'm going to come down now and do the same thing down in this larger area right here. And I'm actually going to get greedy and go after the entire ball of wax. So I'm going after all of the remaining hair that's underneath that. Again, I'm going to go straight to the side and let go. Command D to deselect. There's a couple of hairs that are still in here, but I'll show you what this looks like. Well, here, we might as well go to the healing brush tool right now. So I'm going to be a little bit more specific about that. Healing brush tool, same group, but the third one down. When you get to the healing brush group here, it's important that you only have this set to current layer. And then in the healing brush tool itself, the default of hardness of 50% is where you want to be. And then again, I'm going to get a little bit smaller brush. I've just got a couple of hairs that I want to clean up right here. So I'm going to hold down my Option key to sample this area that's of skin that's right next to it, come across and just paint down here, and you can see it will replace that texture. And then if you want to see what's really going on here, turn your low copy layer back on, and then you'll see that all of that hair is gone. I've got a little bit that's right here by her lip, but if I turn my frequency separation on and off, sorry, let me turn a new virgin copy on the very bottom on so you can see the difference. That's what we've done. And you'll notice we've replaced all the texture. We got rid of the hair, we replaced it with skin texture, but look at the dimensioning there. Her lip has still got, it's still in shadow, it still has form. We did not replace the form because all of the form is on the low layer. Does that make sense? Okie dokie. I want to come up underneath her eye right here. So you can see up underneath this eye, there's some discoloration that's happening in here. There's other things that are going on in here. There's also texture that's going on in here. So we're going to start with doing the low work first. Well, actually, let's start with the high work first. So again, you can do this in real time. So I've got the high layer copy is actually selected. Again, if you were to hold down the Option key and click on it on its eyeball, you could just see this. I think it's easier to spot texture and where I want to bring texture to this, where I want to get it from, than it is to actually be looking at the entire image right here. But that's up to you. Now, for me, one of the things that you need to avoid here is you'll see that this area of skin right in here underneath this texture that I'm having trouble with, this under here is totally flat. There's no texture in it at all. It's in part because she has good skin there, but it's also in part because of the lighting that's on this. So the texture that I want to replace here, I don't want it to be this perfect smoothness here. I need there to be something there. So when I look around here, it's hard to pick out where that is, but if you hold down your Option key and click on the eyeball for this, it's easy to spot there's texture right down in here that would actually work for this area. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to still with my patch tool, I'm going to go back to my patch tool. I'm going to select this area of skin that's really underneath her. And I'm going to pull it down in this direction, but where I'm still got skin texture in it. And then turn on the low copy, Command D to deselect. So this is the change that I've made right now. I didn't obliterate that skin texture. I replaced it with texture itself, not something that was completely void. Is this working for you guys? Okay, I've got discoloration here though. You see how it's sort of like got a pink cast to it underneath it? I don't want to keep that part. It's still showing the same troubled area. So to fix that, you need to go to your low layer. So again, I work on my low layers alone as well. So I'm going to go over low copy, and I'm going to hold down my option key and click on the eyeball, and you can now see the problem that I've actually got here. So when I'm looking at this, I can see that there's an enormous amount of red that's underneath here. I can also see the very same thing that's in the area that's right underneath her eyeball right here. I get the very same problem there. So here we use a completely different trick on this guy. So on this one, again, what we're trying to do is just fix this part. So for me, I use a brush and I paint it. So to do that, you're going to hit the B key to get a brush. You're going to make sure that the blending mode of your brush is normal. You want to make sure that you have a completely soft brush to do this. 100% opacity, and then take your flow down to like a 1 or a 2. I'll start with a 1 and see if it's there. Again, make sure that your low copy is selected and it's the one that's on. And so what I need to do is I need to actually paint color where I see all that pink, and I'm just going to use the color that's right around it. So I'm going to make my brush smaller. Hold down my option key, sample the skin color that's right below it, and then I'm just going to start scrubbing along this line right here just to get that color out. And that's all it takes. So if I turn on my high layer again, you can actually see I'm going to turn my low copy on and off. You can see it just removed that pink color. So without doing any damage to the texture at all, the texture's all still there. If I were to paint on just this image with a paintbrush, this is what it would look like. Here, hang on, let me turn off all of this other stuff. So this is just my copy of my new version right here, and I'm just going to paint on this with my paintbrush, and you can see when I do that, kiss the texture goodbye. Is this making sense to everyone, what's going on here? Guys, this is a huge, massive game changer. Wait till you see the other tricks that we can do with this. So I do want to go down to that small sort of like freckle or mole, whatever it is that's on her cheek here really quickly, just to show you why we were removing the bigger blemishes to begin with. So if you take a look at this thing, I'm going to go up into the very top. This has got problems in both layers. It's going to show up in both layers. So if you go up to your high copy again, hold down the option key and click on the eyeball. Make sure both of them are, you can see it right here. So you can see it's got texture and detail up in my high layer. But if you then click on your low copy, hold down the option key and click on the eyeball for the low copy, you can also see its shadow right there. It is in both high and low. So it's not impossible, like the pimple that we removed on her chin and the other work that we did before when we created the new version, it's not impossible to do that work in split frequency. It's just you have to do it in both the high and the low layer together in order to get rid of it. So to see what that means, turn everybody on. Turn both your high copy on and your low copy on. So we'll see this in effect in real time. I'm going to start with the high copy first. So I'm going to click on high copy. I am going to still use the patch tool, and I'm going to circle this guy. And then again, there's texture that's around this. If I pull straight down here and let go, there's this big dot of no texture sitting in the middle of a field of texture. You can spot this across the street. Do not do that. Command Z to undo that. You need to find a place that's got texture that's similar to the skin that's around this. So I can pull down to one side. That would be a much better move. So that's what I'm going to do and let go. But now you can see you've still got the shadow that's underneath it, because the shadow that's underneath it is in the low layer. I fixed the texture, but I haven't fixed the shadow part. So to do that, go down to your low copy, make it active. You can still use the same patch tool in the same thing that we've got going here. And then I'm just going to click and drag that to the side and let go. Command D to deselect, and I've gotten rid of it. Did that make sense to everyone? What's going on? We good on this part? Okay. You can close that up for the time being. You don't need to save that. I am going to blow everyone away right now. if you go back into that same frequency separation images, there's a thing called wrinkled green skirt. If you can open that up into Photoshop. So how many of you guys are faced with shit like this? You got to get rid of the wrinkles. How would you get rid of those wrinkles? Well, you could do it tonally, right? Again, tone would not screw up the, I mean, if you zoom in here, that fabric has got texture to it. You know, I mean, that would be the problem. You know, how are you going to go after this? Clone stamp tool, healing brush tool? Good luck with that. Is that making, so does everybody have this thing open? Okay, so we're going to split this, and that's how I'm going to go about doing this. So again, with this guy set up as it is right now, there's no major blemishes on here that I need to work on, so I don't need to create a new version. So Command J, double of them. So I've got 2 of them. Double click on the one in the middle and rename it low. Double click on the one on the very top and rename it high. Turn off the eyeball for high, select the low layer, and then we need to blur this till the point that we lose the detail in this. So when I'm looking at this, the texture of the fabric will go pretty quickly, but what I'm really looking for is to lose the stitching as well. You're not going to lose all of it, but we'll lose a good part of it. So again, with the low layer selected, up to the the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. And at my 4, I'm actually, ironically, that looks really pretty good. I'm going to take it down to a 3 and see if that's better. We'll try and go down to a 2. No, 2 brings too much of it back. So I think 4 is going to be my go here. But let me ask you guys this. So when we're doing this whole process, what we're trying to do is we are trying to, in this move, where we're starting here, we are getting rid of the high frequency work, right? We're getting rid of the texture and the detail. How many of you guys feel, wow, wouldn't it be nice if I could do the other thing around? Wouldn't it be nice if I could just decide what detail I wanted? So the question is that, do you prefer to get the low frequency first, or would you prefer to get the high frequency first? Does that make sense what I'm asking? Well, here, I'm going to show it to you anyway. So this is a way to, we're still going to split this, but it's just a different method to get there. So turn on your high layer, turn on the eyeball, and go up to the menu, actually to the very top, and make sure it's active. So it is turned on. And then I'm doing this from memory, so wish me luck. I hope I don't have to refer back to it. I don't split this way a lot, but I always like to challenge that part. So we'll see how we go. I may have to refer to the PDF in a minute, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so with the high layer selected, come up to the view menu. I'm sorry, not the view menu, the filter menu, down to other, over to high pass. So we're just going to start here again. Up, that's the high layer is selected. What we're going to do is we're going to try to pick the detail that we want to keep first. So up to the so filter, down to other, to high pass, and let go. And you'll see that your image turns into a black and white. It doesn't look too dissimilar to the stuff that we actually had before. I'm going to grab my radius and drag it all the way down, and you should just have, if you bring it all the way down to a 0.1, you should just have a gray screen. Does everybody have this? Okay, we're going to take the radius slider and we're going to start pushing it towards the right to actually start to increase it. However, unlike a lot of dialog boxes, this one, all dialog boxes, you can use your up and down arrow keys to actually do steps. In this one, though, it happens pretty quick. We don't get that high, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just start tapping this up, and you'll see that all of a sudden detail is starting to show up. Now, I'm going to continue to push this up. I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to keep going. I'm also going to zoom back out just so that you can see some other stuff that's happening in here. I'm going to grab this slider, and I want you to see what going too far looks like. So if you grab the slider underneath the radius and you start to drag it all the way over, I'm going to go over to like a 6, We'll go to like, here at 36, you can see, this is a real extreme. But at 36, you can see I not only have all my detail, but I'm starting to bring color back into this. Can you see the green and the red that's starting to come in here? That is an indication that you have gone way too far with this. Because again, what I want is I want all of my tone and color to be in the low layer, and I don't want that to be in my high layer. All of these wrinkles in here, all of these wrinkles are low layer. This is all tonal. So I need to bring this down to the point that I can actually see all of the detail in the stitching and the fabric that I want, but that I don't see any of those shadows. I don't see any of the color. So I'm going to zoom back in a little bit more. I don't think this 4 is enough, so I'm going to go to like a 5. I'll see what a 6 looks like. At a 6, I'm starting to, again, pick up a lot of the wrinkling right now. Can you see this, all this wrinkle part right here? I don't want any of that in this layer, like the stitching, all these wrinkles that are right in here. I don't want any of that in this layer, so I'm going to go back down to a 5. They're still there. I'm going to go to a 4, not a 54, but a 4. And I feel pretty good about that. I've got a little bit that's sitting right there, but the rest of it I'm feeling pretty good about. I got all the texture of the fabric. The bigger wrinkles, if we zoom back out, are gone. So at this stage of the game, you have to remember the radius, because we need to use this number in another place. So this is a radius of 4. If it was a radius of 4.1, that 0.1 matters. Otherwise, when you do your split, if the numbers are not exact, you will get an image that's out of register, and it will not be the same as the one that you started with. So again, everybody remember this. If it's 3.6, you got to do 3.6. If whatever the number is exactly, you need to remember. I'm in the habit of writing it down on a piece of paper next to me. That's how I do it, but nonetheless. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. Immediately, you can't wait for this. Immediately, you need to come up to the image menu, down to adjustments, down to brightness and contrast. So this is incredibly important, because if you don't do this next step, this will not work. We need to use the legacy version of this. So I'm going to click on Use Legacy right now. However, if you don't, and you actually make a shift up in here, and then click on Use Legacy, the Use Legacy will reset your sliders up here, and it will not work. So we're going to click on Use a Legacy slider right here, and then I'm going to take my contrast down to a -50. Exactly. Not 49, -50. And then you hope that that's really the thing that you're supposed to do. So then you go back to the high pass version of this, and you say, set the radius, the contrast. Yep, it is the contrast. I just want to make sure it wasn't the brightness slider. So a contrast of -50, and click OK. Change the blending mode now of your high layer to linear light, just like we did before. And then click on your low layer, and we are just going to run Gaussian blur on it. So up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur, and put in 4 pixels and say OK. And that is how you do a reverse split. So that one, you're looking at what detail do I want to keep, whereas in the other one, you were looking at what detail do you want to lose. Make sense? All right, we're still going to do the very same thing we did before. I'm going to make a copy of the low layer, Command-J. I'm going to make a copy of the high layer, Command-J. I'm going to clip the high copy, holding down the Shift key, the Option key to clip it, and then change it back to normal. And then finally, I'm going to put all of those in a single group. So I've just selected all 4 of those layers. Click on the hamburger, do New Group from Layers, and call it FS. Do what? Yes. I can. I'm going to start in the very beginning. All right, so I've just got my layers here. I haven't done anything, right? So on my high pass layer, I've got that selected, up to the filter menu, down to other, down to high pass. And again, we decided, looking back and forth, that 4 was a good number, a pixel number for us to have for this. It kept the detail that I wanted and got rid of all the shadows of the fabric, all the wrinkles, got rid of all that. So I'm going to say okay to that. Then again, I'm going to change the blending mode just like we did for the regular work, from normal down to linear light. And then I need to go down to my low layer right now. You can see this is just too crispy. It's because I've got nothing but high pass in here. So you need to come down to your low layer now, and we are going to blur the low layer. So up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur, and then we need to enter the exact same value of high pass that we used, which was 4.0. So I'm putting in 4.0 for that, and I'm going to say okay to that. So this in itself, by itself, most people would just stop right here. So again, if I click the high layer, I'll click them, so I've got them both. Go to my hamburger, come out and say new group from layers and call it FS, and say okay. And then turn it on and off. And if you see a shift, like I'm seeing a shift right now, what didn't I do? I didn't do the contrast brightness step. So all of this is invalid. So I'm going to go back to where I've just got my 2 name changes. We'll do it one last time. On my high pass layer, I'm starting from scratch. All I've got here is 3 layers of the same thing. One of them is named high at the top, the middle one low, and the background one at the very bottom, the virgin. So with my high layer selected, up to the filter menu, down to other, over to high pass. Again, we decided 4 was the level that worked for this. Say okay. But now at this stage of the game, you need to drop the contrast of this. And it's an exact number. So over to the image menu, down to adjustments, to brightness contrast. Look up at my screen to see where I'm at. Image, adjustments, brightness contrast. Make sure you check use legacy first, and then type in -50 for the contrast and say okay. Finally, go back over to your layers palette, click on the drop down menu from normal for your high layer and change it to linear light. Hold down your shift key and click on low so that you can have them both selected. Click on the hamburger and say put this into a new group for me. Call it FS. Say okay. And then turn it on and off. And I'm still getting a shift in here. Well, then let's do this. Fuck that. Throw both of those away. We're just going to do the regular old version split. So get rid of FS, get rid of all the layers on the top. Just start with the image the way it was. If you don't want to spend time throwing all those layers away, just go up to the very top and click on the of your history palette and click on the state that when this was to begin with. All right, so Command J, double click on the one in the middle, call it low. Double click on the one in the middle, call it low. Double click on the one on the top, call it high. Turn turn high's light off, eyeball off. Select the low layer. We're going to blur it, and we already know how much we're going to blur it. So up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur, and put in 4 pixels and say okay. Turn on your high layer, select it, turn its eyeball on. Up to the image menu, down to apply image. In the layer selecting at the top, you want to pick the low layer because we are going to subtract it from all of this. Subtract is the blending mode, scale of 2, an offset of 128. Say okay to that. And then finally change this to linear light. And then hold down your shift key and put the low layer in with it. Go to the hamburger, say a new group from layers, call this FS, say OK. And then finally turn it on and off, and you see no change. So we are in good shape. Okay.
Can you do that again?
Can I do that again?
Yeah.
The 5th time? Sure. Okay, have you got the layer? All right, Command J.
I've got the high and the low.
Oh, okay, well, let me get there with you. Have you done anything to them?
No.
Okay. Okay, turn off the eyeball for high. Select the low layer. Go up to the filter menu. Down to blur. Over to Gaussian blur. You good? Put in a level of 4 pixels. Say OK. Select the, I've got those completely reversed. Hang on, let me rename these. Turn on the high, select the high layer and turn its eyeball on. You good? Up to the image menu. Down to apply image. In the dialog that opens up, for layer at the top, you want to click on the drop-down menu and select the low layer. Then for the blending mode, you want to click the drop-down menu and go to subtract. For the opacity, 100%. For the scale, 2. And the offset, 128. And say OK. You should have something that looks gray like this. You good?
No. It's just fully gray.
You don't have a eyeball on? Yeah, so let's go back in history before you did that. Go back to before, to this last Gaussian blur. Click on that. Good. All right, so turn off the eyeball for this. Make sure that that low layer is blurred. Zoom in. I don't think it's blurred. Actually, it is. They both are. That's your problem. So throw them both away. Make 2 new copies. Top one's called high. Bottom one's called low. Good. We don't even have to watch this. With the bottom one selected, up to the filter menu, down to blur, Gaussian blur. 4 is good. Say OK. Turn on. Click on your high layer. Come up to image. Down to apply image. And that's all right. Hit OK. And then change the blending mode. You can see the pattern in there. Change the blending mode to linear light. Okay, so we've actually got this image, hopefully working for us right now. So again, I'm going to select both of these, my high and low layer. I'm going to put them into a group. Oh wait, I haven't changed my the blending mode. So let me go down to linear light. Select both of these. Go out to the flat menu, new group from layers, call this FS. Say OK. And then turn it on and off. And I see no change, so that means my split was correct. So again, we're going to do, I'm going to make really quick copies to protect my image, the work that I'm doing. So I've opened up the FS group, I've selected the low layer, hit Command J just to make a copy, and it's called low copy, and you don't need to change anything else. It's great. Click on the high layer, Command J to actually make that copy, and you see it gets really crunchy, it gets much more contrasty. So to fix that, we need to clip this high copy to the one underneath it. So hover your cursor between high copy and high, hold down your Option key, and you will get that little square with the arrow. Click on it, and you will see it shoves that layer over, gives you a little arrow pointing down that indicates that these have been clipped, and then you're changing the blending mode of that high copy to normal. So now we're actually ready to fix this. So if I zip back out, we are going to use the mixer brush to actually do this. So there are very specific settings for the mixer brush. I'm going to show it to you right here. So again, there's another PDF in here called Mixer Brush Settings for Retouching. If you click on this, it will actually open up and it'll show you how you want to actually set this up. So I'm going to double click on this so that we can refer to it, and I'll get it a little bit bigger. All right, so this is what you're going to use your settings for the mixer brush. So again, once you get this set up, most people don't really change this a lot, because unless you're a painter, most people don't use the mixer brush a lot. But for work like this, it's a miracle. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. So in Photoshop, the mixer brush is in the brush group. So if you come down, it is the group that's right above the clone stamp tool. This is where the brush tool is. You also have the adjustment brush tool, the pencil tool, whatever. Down at the very bottom, you should have the mixer brush. Does everybody have this? All right, when you click on that, it's going to give you a set of options up at the very top. These need to be set in a very specific way. So the first thing that you will actually notice is you'll have a kind of brush, you know, how a hard brush or soft brush. Go ahead and set your brush as completely soft brush. And then there is an icon, there's a patch that comes over. This patch is going to matter in just a second. It's a check to make sure that we have everything set right. But to the right of that patch are two icons, and you need to have these set correctly. So if you click on them, the darker background indicates that you've pressed the button in. These are supposed to be push button. The first one you do not want pressed in. The first one you want to click so that it has not got that black background. The second one you do want that pushed in so that it does have the black background. And then finally, as you get over to the wetness, you want to put in 20%. The load you want at 100%, the mix at 100%, and then your flow is going to depend on how fast you want this whole thing to happen. So the rates, if you look back on the PDF for the flow, it says here 20 to 50%. That's probably a good place to be. Sometimes I'll hit it a little bit harder than that. Sometimes I'll back off a little bit. You'll see basically what's going to happen. So, but the most important check about all of this then is that when you look at this now set up, you should see this is the patch that the patch that is the square that's just to the left of those two push button icons that we put in up in the options bar. That should show checkerboard. It should be blank, because what we are going to do here now when we work with the mixer brush is that we are going to tap on a part of our image which will load the brush, and then we're going to drag down. So we are dragging the color of one area onto another area. But then when we let go, we want the brush to completely clean itself so that if I go somewhere else, it doesn't carry that color somewhere else. So for instance, I've got green on one side of this and khaki on the other. I'm going to start working on the green side, but then when I go to the khaki side, I don't want to bring green paint with me. So the way this brush is now set up is that after every single stroke, the brush is cleaned, and that will work really well for you. So then this is how you use the brush. So I'm going to start here on this crease that's right here. So watch my screen just so you can see how to do this. So the reason you're seeing this wrinkle right here is you've got a highlight on one side and you've got a shadow on the other side. And then you've actually got sort of like normal color that's sitting right in this area right here. So when we do this, remember what you're going to do is you are going to be dragging color across. So I want to start with good color here, and I want to drag it into this area that is darker shadow to change its color. This is exactly what we did with tonal retouching with that girl's pimple. If you took the highlights and you brought them down and the shadows and you brought them up and you got to that neutral area, the pimple was gone. The same thing is going to happen for this wrinkle. But again, I'm only going to work on my low copy layer here. All of my texture is protected up here in the high copy. I'm not touching that. I'm just going to change this down here. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. I'm going to set my flow around 30, something like that. So again, watch what happens here. I'm going to go through this pretty quick. So just watch what happens, and then once you get a handle for it, whatever, I'm going to let you go to town on this. So I'm just going to click and drag up, and 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 click, and that is already gone. I'm going to start down here, click and drag up, click and drag up, click and drag up, click and drag over, click and drag over, up and up and up. And then I can actually come here and try to get some of that highlight removed and possibly drag more of this up. And I'm just going to continue to click and paint like this and continue to drag up. And you can see that I'm actually getting rid of that wrinkle. So if you zoom in and take a look at this area, all of the texture of the fabric is still there. I haven't lost any of that. But look at the difference in the FS and the knot. Right now, anybody who shoots fashion should have wet their pants. This is not the only way to do it. So now you can see the area up here. Do me a favor, get rid of the big wrinkle. Just try it. If you've got this thing open, try it right now. Just get rid of the big wrinkle. I'm going to continue to work on mine a little bit more. I'm going to go after some of the other ones here, but you'll get an idea. Again, you're always looking for good color to pull from, so don't just continue to pull. Move around a lot. It helps.
Would this work on seamless too?
We'll work on what?
Would this work on like seamless too? Like.
Oh, yeah. This works on everything. I know. I'm actually even going to go after part of the khaki side here. So this is what I was telling you about. I've only been working on the green right now, but my brush is completely clean. So I can just go right into the khaki group and start working on it. And I wouldn't remove like every single possible imaginable wrinkle forever. Otherwise, this thing will simply look flat. So I don't mind leaving a little bit in, but anyway, you'll get it. So then when you get to the line where the two of them meet, then you pretty much have to trace the line. So you get your brush centered right on the seam in the middle, and you want to just click and drag down. You don't want to come across, because otherwise you'll either pull green into the khaki or khaki into the green, one of the two. So I would just continue to sort of stroke right down that line so that nothing else happens. But I'm picking up a lot more shadowing in there because the shadow already existed in there. So I'm just going to work my way over. The other option that you could do on this is that you could make a selection of this. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back in time. Well, that was all still there. So instead of trying to, because what was happening, guys, is that I was actually bringing shadow content on this. So instead, if you make a selection of the green area, so I'm just going to grab my quick selection tool and select just the green. That's selected everything. Deselect. Option key, get rid of that side. So now I've got a selection going that is just of the green here. So now I can go back to my mixer brush. And because this restriction won't allow my green paint to go into the khaki area, then I can just start hitting this from the side. And I don't need to worry about that part at all. All right, is this working for everyone? All right, let's go after this area that's at the very top. So the very top part that's like sitting right underneath it, if you've got a selection going right now, hit Command D to deselect, otherwise you don't know where you can or you cannot paint. I need to fix this area up in here, but the problem that I've got with this area up in here is that I'm worried if I do the strokes from the bottom up to try to clean this area out, I'm actually going to I'm going to hit the khaki belt part that's at the very top. So I'm going to go after this a completely different way. So the way I'm going to go after this is just with a regular paintbrush. So again, not the mixer brush. Go back to your regular paintbrush. So again, same tool up at the very top, a regular paintbrush. Make sure that it is a completely soft brush. Make sure it's 100% opacity. And the flow on this, I'm going to probably put around 4, 5, 5, 6, somewhere right in there. You want it relatively low. And we'll see. If it's too low, then we'll change things, we'll move. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. And then the trick to this is that we're actually going to just physically paint this thing. But you want to resample from a bunch of places. You don't want to continue to only use one color that's actually up here. So I'm going to start down here. I'm going to hold down my Option key and sample a color right here. And then I'm just going to start running across that, stop, hold down your, get another sample of color and just pull this back in. Another sample of color, and you want to paint in the green part, another sample of color, and paint this in, another sample of color, and paint that out, another sample of color, and paint that, another sample, and paint that. So I get to the same place, just a different way. So then to see what we've really done, turn on your FS checkbox on and off, and look at that. It's just insane. And I mean, clearly we got other work that we can actually do. I would go back to my mixer brush and still working on my low copy on make it a much larger brush. And I'm just going to start doing really big areas like this to kill that. And the same thing on this side. And again, you're not trying to remove every single thing in here. You're just trying to. And then again, I would go back if I want. Hey. Yeah, my low copy just got moved. And I didn't move it, Photoshop. Look at this. My low copy just took off, and there's no register in my history that I actually moved that. So they said, oh, I take it back. It is right there. That was where the move was. Anyway, questions about this? You guys look so fucking depressed. It's killing me here.
We are.
Why? Do you have any idea what this can do for you? Do you have any idea what a moneymaker this is? And how incredible this is going to be for your own work? I feel like I need to, I don't know. I need to do this naked somehow or something. So it's rattle the cage just a little bit. Believe me, you don't want to see that. What?
Why would that make our depression better?
I don't know. You would say to yourself, no, you could say to yourself, well, oh my God, look at that old man, and I'm so young, and I've got so much in front of me to live my life, and I've got so much yay. So that's why. Okay. All right, so again, if you turn this on and off, you can see just how amazing that actually works and how little it took. And again, go in and take a look at this. All of the texture is still there. We haven't lost any of that. That's the secret of doing frequency separation work. Say what?
I said that's so cool.
I know.
No, like actually, really.
You feel bad now.
Yeah, no, this is really cool. But I was gonna ask also, like, why didn't it? Like, if you were to do this on other clothing, maybe that wasn't as big of a space, and because I'm seeing that it's not affecting the texture or like the threading, would that cause problems if you're trying to do clothing that have wrinkles but have like embroidery of some sort?
Well, we just did it here, and this is how different is stitching than embroidery, or the texture of the fabric. Yeah, let's try one other. There's another one that we've got here. You can close this guy up. We'll try the same trick. That maybe is going to answer what you're looking at here. There's one that's plaid. So we'll see. Were you going to say something?
I feel like with my
What's your flow?
30. But if those results are up,
All right, hang on one second.
Either I put it up to 50.
oh, okay.
But
Like, this is a pity.
So there's another image that we can open up to work on really quickly. So go back to your frequency separation images again. And there is a thing called fabric retouch.psd, if you can open that one up. All right, I'm hellbent and determined to find out why that split going with high pass didn't work, so I'm going to try that again. I think somewhere in the line of things, I don't know, don't know what I did, but I know that I'm doing it the right way, so anyway, we'll just check and make sure. So I'm going to zip into here, and you can see the wrinkles that are on the side of this girl's pants, and you can also see that there's a fabric. It's not just a texture to the fabric, but it's actually got, it's not really a plaid, but it's got a different color of thread to it, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to try to split this one and see if we can't get rid of those wrinkles. So again, I'm going to hit Command J twice. Does everybody have this image open? Okay. Double click on the top one and call it high. Double click on the bottom one and call it low. Click on the high one to make it active. And let me just zoom in here just a little bit. I just want to make sure I'm seeing the detail that I want to keep in here. So with the high one selected, up to the filter menu, down to other, to high pass. And when high pass opens up, you can see immediately, mine came up with a 4, and you can see that this is too aggressive on the high pass. Look at the amount of color that I'm pulling into this. I'm getting color up on her shirt. I'm getting color in her arm. So this 4 is clearly too aggressive. So I'm going to back this way off. I'm going to start all the way down and then just start to slowly work my way in. And I'm going to go to my arrow keys. I can't have those wrinkles showing. So the wrinkles, the texture, the stuff that's down in here, I'm at a 0.4. Does that work for you guys? Again, if we go up higher than this, so like here, I've gone up higher. I'm like at a 1.4 right now, but now I have the wrinkles that are in the high pass layer. Those wrinkles that I'm trying to get rid of, the shadows and the highlights that I'm trying to get rid of, I can't do it here because I'm bringing this up into the high layer, which is where all of my texture is supposed to be. So I've got to just start working my way down. Again, I'm using just my arrow keys to the point that I actually see those sort of disappear. I leave a little bit of that in there, but I'm like at a 0.3 or a 0.4, so that's what I'm going to go with. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to my 0.4. Just remember that. Immediately go over to the image menu, to adjustments, to brightness and contrast. Click on legacy, do a -50 in the contrast. And say okay. And then click on your low layer. First off, make your high layer, change this blending mode to linear light. And then click on the low layer, and you're going to do a Gaussian blur of 0.4. And say okay. And then we're going to put both of these into a group. So I've selected both high and low. Click on the pancake and do new group from layers, call it FS, and then turn it on and off, and yay, lo and behold, it worked. Okay, so I'm going to open this up. I am going to make my safety layers here as well. So I'm going to click on the low layer and hit Command J. That's all we need to do with that. Click on the high layer, Command J. Clip the high layer to the high one that's right underneath it by hovering your cursor right between the two, between high and high copy. Hold down the Option key and click. That clips it over, and then change the blending mode of that top high copy back to normal. And we should be in good shape. So this is going to be a little bit tricky to do this work right now because I'm going to try to get rid of these wrinkles right here, but I want to protect her arm. I don't want this to hit her arm. I don't want any of those things to hit. So I'm going to go back to all the way down, not to my low copy, not to any of the FS copies, I'm actually going to hold down my option key because I want to make sure that this is a good clean selection. If I make the selection, use any of the selection tools based on the low copy, then it's already been blurred, so it's not going to really fit. So I need to go back to my original version that doesn't have anything. So I'm going to hold down the option key and click on the eyeball to turn everyone else off, select it, and then I'm going to actually just use the quick selection tool. We'll see how good we get with this tool right now. So quick selection tool, and I'm just going to select her arm first. So I'm just going to click and run down her arm and hopefully get her fingers and all that part. And I really just care about this edge that's running along here, and I feel like that part's pretty good. So I'm going to leave this at that, and I'm going to save this selection. So up to the select menu, down to save selection, and I'm going to call it arm. And say OK. And then Command D to deselect. Then I'm going to go after the sweater. So again, I don't want this sweater to be hit on this either. So I'm going to click on the sweater part and work my way over. And then it didn't really get that sweater part at the very edge, so I'm going to hold down my option key to clean that up a little bit. And that's a reasonably good line underneath the sweater. Yeah, I'm okay with that part. And so I'm going to save the sweater now. So again, select menu, down to save selection, and call it sweater. And then finally, Command D to deselect. I'm going to select the white background. There's just a little bit that's between her arm. So make my quick selection tool much smaller and just click to drop that out. And option delete to clean that up. And I'm going to just save that selection as well. Up to the select menu, down to save selection, and we will call this background. And say OK. Now with background actually already selected, well here, I'm going to hit Command D to select. We're just going to do this from the very beginning. So if you come up to your select menu, I want to put these all together as one complete selection. So come up to the select menu, down to load selection. You get a little drop down menu here that has hand, arm, sweater, and background on it. So I'm going to pick the arm. I think it's I think this is a carryover. I think hand is a selection that was left over. So anyway, I'm going to pick arm and say OK. So it loads the whole arm. That part's great. Right back to the select menu again, down to load selection. And now in the drop-down menu, click this. You're going to add sweater. So click on sweater. But now instead of saying you want this a new selection, you click on I want to add this to the selection that's already going. So click on that and say OK. And now it's going. And then finally, we're going to add select menu down to load selection. And we are going to add the background. And say, again, not a new selection, add to. And say OK. And then finally, I'm going to save this overall. So I'm just going to call this new selection, save selection, and I'm going to just call it protect the pants. And say OK. So again, if I'm going to do something right now, so I'm going to make red my foreground color. I'm working on my background layer right here. And a brush, not a mixer brush, but a regular brush. And I'm just going to paint across this, and you can see what's happening in here is that this area, I've got the wrong area selected. This is the area that I want to be active is now being protected. The area I want to be protected is now active. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and I'm going to invert my selection. So up to the select menu, down to inverse. And again, it looks the same, except if you zip all the way out, you'll see that there's marching ants going all the way around the image. So this is protecting this area. So now I can go in and do my mixer brush work on this part of her leg. So I'm going to go to my low copy. I'm going to turn it on. I don't like to see the high copy here. I want to actually see, so I'm going to turn high copy and high off. So I just see the blurred version of this. I am going to go to my mixer brush. We'll see. This may require actually using something else, but we'll try. So mixer brush, make it considerably smaller. And then again, I want to work from areas that are good to areas that are not good. So I'm going to start here on this side of her hip, and I'm going to just try to work my way straight down to see if I can't get some of that out. And I can do that. And again, I don't need to worry about going across and hitting her arm because it's protected. And I can do the same thing now into getting this out. And then I'm going to work my way up. And then finally, I've got some problems with this area. I see these little striations, these little stripe areas right here that I want to actually smooth those out. So I'm going to go to a regular brush to do that. Make it much smaller. And again, a really low flow. I've got a 6 on here. I'm going to take it down even lower than that. I'm going to go down to like a 1. Holding down my Option key, I'm going to sample what I think is a more common color for these. I'm going to just click on that, and then I'm going to go through these highlights and the shadows both. And then turn on your highlighter and see how it went. So I still see striations in here. So I still think I can probably hit this with a little bit more mixer brush. So that's what I'm going to do. Still working on my low layer, but I'll watch it happen in real time. And we'll sample color from down here. I'm picking up more because what's happening is that as I come across this area right here, it's actually hitting this part up here. So I'm going to try and bring it in from the other side. Yeah, the only way I can do that is with a brush. So back to a regular brush. And I'm going to sample this lighter color right here. And then go after the darker area that's in the middle. Sample another super lighter area. Oh, that was a mistake. So, Liz, does this answer your question?
Yeah. I feel like maybe if it was a more like extreme pattern, it would like blend it out.
What happens is that, so if you have a wrinkle and you remove the highlight and shadow, it doesn't account, because when you have wrinkles, if you've got a fabric that has got a distinct pattern in it, you'll actually see the curve of the distinct pattern in the wrinkle, right? So you'll get rid of the wrinkle, the highlight and the shadow, but that curve in the pattern of the fabric will still be there. So then you use the liquify tool to take care of that, which we get to next week. I know. Questions about any of this? Yes.
So why won't you do go to the brightness contrast? Why do you put -50?
So if you knew the math behind this, I can send you the guy who really gets into the depth of explains the math behind this. How good are your physics?
I prefer not to.
Yeah.
To go into that.
Stick to the recipe. Ultimately, what it ends up being is that when you do the because we're not doing a subtraction thing now anymore. That's not happening. So it's not like you can say, okay, we've got this and now subtract this. So and it also doesn't give you that when we do that offset part. What that offset is doing is that it's actually putting in middle gray, 128 middle gray. That's why we picked that number. That doesn't show up because it's in a blending mode, a linear light blending mode, like a soft light blending mode, does not show 50% gray. It's the same reasoning. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to then remove anything except for texture that is different from that. both high and low. And the reason that you keep the texture when you do that is that, again, it functions in a similar way to a soft light layer in that anything that's darker stays darker, anything that's lighter stays lighter. So the texture stays intact. Make sense?
I think so.
Okay. Anyway, you can close this one up. We don't need to save this. And we are actually ahead of the game a little bit. I love this. So hang on 1 second. Let's look at homework really quickly just to make sure there's no questions about that. And then if they're not, I'm going to we're going to go back and do a little bit of shadow work. We're going to try to get ahead of what we're doing next week. So let me make sure I know what we're doing next week. No, I don't want to go there. Okay, I know what we'll do. At any rate. So yeah, if you go to your assignment folder for this week, inside the assignment folder is a copy of that girl, this one right here, that we just put onto a white background. So that part of the homework is already done. So in my case, I'm going to open mine up again. You can open yours up as well so we can take a quick look at it. There's two versions of this file. So one of the versions in here in your assignment folder is the original file, the one that we've actually already worked on. The other one says it's the same title, but it has notes. It's just a JPEG. If you can actually open that one up as well. So this is what I'm asking you to do for the assignment. So if you zip in here and take a close look at the notes one, so it's going to say that you need to fill in the hair here. You need to clean up the eyebrows. You need to balance the skin tone. See how much red there's in this skin tone right here, surrounded by skin that's got a lot of green in it. You need to balance that. You need to fix all the blemishes and flaky skin. And I'm not pointing to every single one of them. So again, I'm pointing to the two of them that are right here, but there's stuff that's all over this girl. So just like this one on her cheek, I didn't put an arrow pointing to it, but you get the idea. It's a general note. You need to smooth out the skin that's under the eyes. You need to remove, she has contact lenses. You can see the shadows of them right here. You need to remove the contact lenses. You need to even out all the skin. Look at that spot that's right under her face. All of that. You need to fix the teeth. Now this is a multi-step thing. So you can see that her two front teeth are slightly crossed. You need to uncross them. You can see she's also missing a tooth on the right side here. You need to add a tooth to actually fix that part. And then it would be helpful if you could clean up the shape of those teeth slightly, but just get them uncrossed and add the missing tooth and you'll be good to go on that. Fix the lip and take a quick look at this. If we're looking in here, this happens to people all the time. People will remove all the highlights from this lip and then she just looks like she's dead. That's not what this is about. When I say fix the lip, it's these little blotches of sort of like dead skin that are sitting up here on the very top. You want to get rid of those. There's these three little dots of dead skin over here, but you don't want to remove all the texture of her skin or she just looks like a freak. So don't get rid of that stuff. It's like when we talk about doing catch lights in eyes. You don't want to get rid of the catch lights in the eyes or do that kind of stuff right here. So that's basically what's going on here. You can see she's got these smile lines that are on the side. I'm asking you to get rid of the peach fuzz that's on her face, all of that stuff. And you'll see other things. There's stray eyelashes in here that I'm asking you to remove, all of that stuff. Get rid of the veins that are in her eyes. So some people came up to me. I got a question about the assignment last week. How do you actually do the hair and the teeth, or how do you do the teeth and the eyes for the tonal retouching one? Tonal retouching. Same thing. The only difference is that you wouldn't use the skin color to do it. You would actually sample the color of the teeth make a lighter dodging color and a darker burning color and use that to actually lighten or darken up the eyes and the teeth. Make sense? Are we good on this part? Okay, so that's the challenge in this. So just so that you're aware of those notes, that's what I'm going to expect you guys to do. We can actually start doing a little bit of work on this. At the very least, we can go ahead and split this image and sort of start there a little bit. And then I may take a quick veer off into something else. But this way, at least everybody will have the image that they need to work with. Was everybody able to get this final merged version? Well, then I'm not going to do this right now because you guys can't you can't actually handle that part of it all. So again, just follow the video to get to the new version part of this. You'll be fine. We're going to close this up, and there's some other place that I wanted to go anyway, so we might as well go there right now. So if we go back to 6, let me see what's actually in 6. Oh, this will be a good place to end this. Yeah. So if you would go to session 6, your files in session 6, inside that is a folder called Skin Correction by the Numbers. And inside of that is a Terry Richardson photograph of a girl's chest called Sunburn. If you can open that up. So if you know who Terry Richardson is, there's no surprise. But at any rate, I need to remove the sunburn of this, and I'm going to show you 2 methods to actually do this. And the reason I do this part is that to show you the 2 different methods is that a lot of times you're trying to match skin tones. You're trying to match skin tones from one image to another. A lot of times people, when you do composite works, people will bring, 2 versions of the same person into one photograph, and one's radically different color than the other one, and you're trying to get them to be the same color. How would you guys fix that? Basically, you go in and you start wildly moving curves around, and you hope that you land on something, and an hour later you're frustrated and you give up and you decide you're not going to do that composite anyway because you hated the idea, and you're just going to move on, right? So that's the wrong way to approach this. Don't let your lack of ability to do something drive the thing that you want to do. If you want to do it, you should do it. So at any rate, we're going to look at 2 really quick methods of actually getting rid of this sunburn. If you're in my assisting retouching class, I'm not assisting retouch, the assisting digital tech class. We actually did this exact same image in Capture One. It works a whole lot easier in Capture One than what we're going to do right now. But nonetheless, we're going to go after this part. So to start with this, we're going to do what we always do. We're going to make a copy of this. So Command J. If you zoom into the sunburn, I'm going to look at the very worst part of the sunburn right here. If you've ever had a really bad sunburn, you might be able to relate to this. But you'll see the skin here is really blotchy. I've got like some greenish skin that's happening right up in here. I've got red skin that's happening here. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to use a set of numbers to make this correction, which would hopefully help make this faster and easier and more accurate to do. But the problem that I've got right now is that if I go to sample this thing, there's too much blotchiness in this. So if I put a color sampler point down, I don't know what I'm going to hit. I don't know if I'm going to hit a really red spot in here or some little green spot in here. So this also works if you're going to try to steal color from a magazine. You can scan a magazine, but then when you go in to actually sample its color, you have to blur it first. Otherwise, you run the risk of hitting a halftone dot that is either cyan, magenta, or yellow, right? So the first thing we're going to do here is just blur this. So up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. And I'm going to hit this like a 3 pixel. 2 is almost there, but 3, this gives me a good shot. So it's now pretty solid color here. So I'm going to hit OK on that one. And then I am going to grab my color sampler tool. So the color sampler tool. And what you want to find is a place that's the worst. So I'm going to try to remove this sunburn. So the place that I want to put this sampler tool down is not the light sunburn that's happening right down here on the edge of her boob. I'm going to go after something up in here that is the deepest of the reds, that's like right in here. And I'm going to click and put down a color sampler point right there. Again, make sure it's a 3x3 average. So now I know what the problem is. And when you do this trick, you always want to pick the problem first. It's easier to work with in your info palette if you pick the problem area first. You can do it the other way around. It's just more effort. So again, then I'm going to back out again. And I'm going to look now for a place of skin that I want this color to be. So a lot of people will pick her arm as a color for it to be, or they'll pick the area up above on the top of her chest. Neither one of those are going to work for us. The area that's on the top of her chest has got sunburn in it as well. It's not as bad, but it does have sunburn in it, and so do her arms. So why am I going to pick sunburn and add it to sunburn? What I'm going to go after is the area that's right underneath this. So I'm going to come down lower on her body, right underneath her boobs. You don't want to go too far to the side because her torso has got shape. And as you move that shape to the sides and you start to move, basically those sides start to move into shadow as they go back to the background. So you don't want to come way over here and pick a spot here. I'm going to pick something like right here in the middle, and I'm just going to click and put another color picker down. Now I'm going to do this on the blurred image, but then we are going to get rid of the blurred image. But while I'm doing this work, I want because it's affecting these numbers. That's basically what's going on here. So if you take a look at your info palette, you will see that you've got this source number 1 that is got a 243 red. And the thing is that I've got a source number 2 that is a 231 red. I want these numbers, I want my after numbers of my point number 1 to equal the before numbers of my point number 2. So what I want is I want these numbers right here, this number 1, to equal these numbers right here. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, so I'm just going to add a curve on top of this. I get the feeling like 2 people in this room are doing this with me. This is killing you guys. Number 1, you can't stand hearing me just lecture. You've got to be bored out of your fucking mind right now. Your mind has already drifted away. All I've got here is one image. All you had to do was open it. Anyway, just saying. I'm going to use the targeting adjustment tool. It's the little hand that's right here. I'm going to click on the drop-down menu and go to the red channel. And then I'm going to hover over the targeting adjustment tool. It gives me this little eyedropper. I'm going to hover over that point. That is where I feel like it is the absolute worst. You'll see that I have before and afters right now. So that's why I said you do the damaged area first. These after set of numbers right here, this 243, 173, 166, need to equal the before numbers here, the 231, the 194, and the 176. So with the red channel selected, my targeting adjustment tool, I want this 243 to be 231. I'm simply going to click on this. It will set the color point on my curve, and I'm just going to drag down till it reads 231. Now when I do that, if you take a look, you can see on our curve over here that 243 that I picked was so close to this top corner that it's causing a real distortion in my curve. I mean, I got there, I got it to 231, but it's also impacting everything below it in a way that's much, much, much harder than I want this to be. So I'm going to tear that curve off, that point off. I'm just going to grab the white point up at the very top and just drag it down. It will be less damage to the rest of the color of my image. So I'm just going to click and pull this down, and again, I'm watching that after point till it gets down to 231. And there we go. So now I've got a 231, and you can see the curve is much closer to its original. It's not got that really strong shape to it, so it's not going to damage the rest of the color of my image. So then I'm going to go to my green channel, and again, still using the targeting adjustment tool. I've now got a green of 173, and so I need to get that 173 up to 194. Again, my second point is my ideal. So I'm going to click on this. It'll set a point on my curve, and I push up until I get it to hit 194. And it's an okay shaped curve, so I'm fine with this part. But you can see now that this went up just one too much. That this 194, my green now is matching, my green of the damaged area, the green of the sunburn is now matching the green of the good area. And then finally, I'm going to go after the blue. So I'm going to go to the blue channel. Again, using the targeting adjustment tool. I've got a 166 and I need it to be a 176. So I'm going to click on this and push it up till I get to 176. And now you can see that the after numbers of my damaged area are equaling the before numbers of my undamaged area. So the curve is doing exactly what I need it to do. It's doing a really good job of that. So I'm going to leave the curve as it is. I'm going to throw away the blur layer. It's done its job. I don't need that anymore. But now I need to control where this thing is actually painted on her skin because it's now affecting the entire image. So I'm going to invert my mask. So click on the layer mask of the curve and just hit Command I to invert it. It brings all the sunburn back. Great time for your tablet. Hit the B key to get a brush. We're going to make this a completely soft brush. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, and I'm going to pump the flow up to like a 3 or a 4. Yeah, something like that. I don't want to see these little points on her body anymore, so you can either click the color sampler tool and hit clear or hit Command H. Again, it just hides the extras. I'm going to double click on this hand to actually get it to come up higher. The B key to get a brush, make it a pretty good size brush. And then I'm just going to start working really quick. So I'm going to start in the areas that need the most correction first, which are right here. So I'm just going to start tapping in. You just see it just took off and it went way too fast for me. So this 3 flow is too high. Command Z to undo it. I'm going to take my flow all the way down to 1. And then I'm just going to start to paint across this. I'm going to go to a bigger brush and paint areas up in the top and paint this area down in here a little bit more. I'm going to go after her shoulders and her arms up a little bit more. The shoulder, especially at the top, get rid of a little bit of that. Possibly a little bit more in here. And that's basically going to be it. Now, if you hold down your Shift key, your Option key, and you click on the mask, this is basically what my mask looks like. So a lot of areas that are right there on the very top part of her boobs, actually removed a lot of it. As I get up into the top part of her chest, less of it. Both of her arms, a little bit more, especially her shoulders. So that's basically where I'm starting from this. However, I've got another problem, and that is the tonal part of all of this. So the tonality, you can see that this area where the sunburn is actually slightly darker. So to cheat this really quickly, I'm going to do another curve on top of this. So click and add another curve. And this is a great trick for sort of like instant dodging and burning. So you can use blend modes to actually lighten or darken your image. So if you come over to your blending mode of this new curve and simply click on it and you come down to screen, you'll see that your image gets extremely light. If you go down to the dark, go up to the darken group and go to multiply, you see your image gets very dark. Screen and multiply are the opposites of one another, and people use these blending modes to death. I'm going to ask you to set your blending mode of this new curve to screen. And then again, we are going to invert this mask, Command I. But now I have got a dodging and burning tool. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. It's still going to be at that 1% flow. And this area that I feel like is darker, I'm just going to lighten it up. So again, I'm just going to paint on this to lighten that and paint on this to lighten that. And lighten that. And this is my removal. And there's no guessing. I'm not just going in there blindly saying, oh God, I got to get rid of that red. I got to get, yeah, blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, so this is one method of actually doing it. I'm going to put both of these curves together. I'm selecting both of them into their own group. And I'm going to call this group curve correction. URV. And then I'm going to turn it off. So that's one way of doing it. There's another way of doing this. So the other way of doing this is to select the figure again. We don't need to make a copy of this because we're only using adjustment layers to fix these things. So I'm going to select this, select her again, and then I'm going to put a hue saturation layer on top of that. So up to hue saturation layer, and it will actually put a hue saturation layer on top of it. Now, the way that this tool works, most of you are comfortable in going in and just using saturation. You make the saturation higher or lower or that kind of stuff, whatever. But the advantage of this tool is that it can be extremely targeted. So what I want to do is the only thing I want to change is this red. So I'm going to show you a trick to really restrict where you change things using this particular tool right here. So we are going to start with the targeting adjustment tool. So go ahead and click on the targeting adjustment tool. And then again, I'm going to find, actually I should do what I did before. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer and blur it so that I know that I'm really hitting the right point. So again, I've selected the background layer, Command J. We're just going to run the same Gaussian blur. If you go up to your filter, and you'll see that recently used filters are sitting up at the very top. If you were happy with the value that you used before, you don't have to come down into the menus and select it. You can just select Gaussian blur and it will blur it. So again, then I'm going to zoom into this area here. I'm going to select my hue saturation. If you click on the targeting adjustment tool again on this tool at the very top, you'll see that right now this is set to do master. If you click on that drop down master, you see you can be very selective about the color ranges that you actually want to work in. So, but I'm going to let the targeting adjustment tool pick that for me. So I'm going to come over here, make a much smaller. Click on the targeting adjustment tool so I get the eyedropper. And again, I'm looking for the very deepest of the red burn that I can find, that I can possibly find in here. So I'm going to click that right there. And what you'll now see is that there is a scale at the very bottom of your hue saturation. And this is the color range that has been picked. So we can modify this color range depending. We can make it more selective. We can do all sorts of things with it. But what's happening here, if you look at this, is that the area that's right in the center, that's between those two sort of like pillars, the two like just straight up and down lines, this line right here and this line right here, everything between those two is completely selected. And then as you start to go from the bar to the little arrow on this side, the selection ramps down. So, and then once you get outside of that selected area right here, nothing happens. So I'm going to zip back out and show you, this is the trick that you use to really be able to refine this guy. So, sorry, let me just double click on the hand to get that. So to do this, I want you to actually take the saturation slider and crank it all the way up, and I want you to take the hue slider and crank it all the way up as well. You'll end up with this like nuclear looking image here. And what this is showing us is that all of what I'm looking at now is within this color range. This range that's sitting right down here, all of that is within this. The only thing that's maybe outside of that is the black bra. So I want to narrow this part down to really just go after this part that's in the middle. So this is the freak show is what I want to see. But here, if you hover down underneath the second bar on these two bars on the bottom, you can actually click and you can move this entire, or click in the middle right here, you can move this entire range up and down to see what is impacted and what is not impacted. And so what I'm going to do is not do that. I'm just going to simply narrow this range. So I'm going to click on one of the bars, the one that's on the right hand side, and I'm going to click and I'm going to try to push it in towards the center. And then I'm going to go after the other side and click and push it in towards the center. And then I'm going to grab these triangles that are on the out. I'm trying to narrow my range down. So I'm going to click here and pull this into the center. And I'm going to click on the other side and pull it into the center. And keep going. So I'm not able to really get anything here, and that gets to be frustrating. So to change that, you'll notice that you've got those same three eyedroppers that are sitting right here that we had in the color range tool. I'm going to click on the minus color range one right here, and I'm going to click on the outside of her skin. And you can see that actually then changed things. It pulled it out. So my blue that's happening on here that's really showing what's affected of this skin is now primarily on her chest. It's in the area where the sunburn really actually is. You can continue to use that minus tool in other places. Like if you click up in the very top, I can get rid of some of it right there. So it's just a way to see what's being affected and refined it. You can see that now this tool has pulled a lot off of her arms, off of her chest, that kind of stuff. It looks like I've still got a lot in the green area right here, so I'm going to try and shift this whole thing slightly to the left. Everybody going sort of towards the left, and I'm getting more of her skin tone back. And still, what's being affected is the red sunburned area right here. So I don't know that I'm going to get a whole lot more than this. I'm going to trick these out just a little bit more. Yep, I'm pulling in that color slider a little bit more. So you can see now that primarily the area that's really being affected is just her chest. So then, once you get to this point, zero out your saturation by double-clicking on it and zero out the hue part of this, and then you realize that this is in large part just a change in color. So grab your hue and just start to move it slightly towards the right. And then you've also got a lightness slider here. Grab your lightness slider and also start to push that towards the right. And then you can actually get rid of the blur layer. You don't need that one anymore. And this is the fix. So I'm going to do a history snapshot of this and call it hue saturation. And say OK. I'm going to turn it off and go back up to the curve one and do a history snapshot of that. And then go up to the top and go back and forth between the two. Which one do you think works better? I think the curve one is a little too hot though. It like blew it out a little too much, don't you think?
I like the second one.
This one you like better? Again, I think the curve's a little too hot, so I'm just going to open this up. And it's this, it's the screen layer on here. I'm just going to drop the opacity down a little bit. That seems better to me. I'll do a snapshot of that. So then this is the hue saturation model, and this is the, but that's how simple it is. And again, this is not just about skin, guys. You can match. You want my skin to be the color of that watermelon? No. A lot of people here do freak shit, right? How many of you said, hey, surrealism, that's my game, right? So why wouldn't you turn my skin into looking like a watermelon? I mean, if that was your idea, right? Questions about any of this? Okay. And you think it's over. One last thing, just one last thing. When we were doing the choke and spread, did you guys by any chance save that choke and spread image after we choked it? If you didn't, it doesn't matter. We can find it really quickly. I'm going to show you shadows and at its very basic 1, 2, 3. Where are you? Oh, it's in. All right. So in your class for session 5, there is the choke and spread image. If you can open that up for me really quickly. So just to get you prepared for compositing, which we're going to head into soon, we are going to not choke this girl again. We've already gone through that whole process, but I was hoping that I could show you how to do, why does it not look like she's in this space? She's missing shadows, right? So I'm going to show you how to do shadows. There's a number of different ways where you get into very complex ones, which I will also show you, but I'm going to show you the easiest version of it right now. Because it can get you a long way, and we can easily do this in 10 minutes. So to do it, If you're really good, if anybody in here is a painter or an illustrator or that kind of stuff, and you're really good at this shit, then go ahead and just hand paint your shadows. But I'll show you why I think that that's a problem. So to do this, zoom into her feet. I'll make my screen slightly brighter. Zoom into her feet, and this is the part that makes it unbelievable. I mean, she's floating. It just wouldn't be like this. So to fix this, you always put your shadows between the background and the figure. Now, there are people who put shadows on top of the figure, but if you do that, you then need to mask them all out, which is ridiculous. If you put them underneath the figure, but on top of the background, the shadows will always be where they're meant to be, and it's just easier to work. So I'm going to click on my background layer. I'm going to then hit, and I'm going to add a blank new layer underneath it, and then I'm going to hit the B key to get the brush tool. I'm going to hit the D key to default my foreground background colors to black and white. I'm going to make sure that this is not a completely soft brush, but a pretty soft one, so probably around 25 or 30% for my brush. I'm going to go ahead and bring my opacity all the way up, my flow all the way up, and a normal blending mode on this. And then again, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit more, and I'm just going to try to paint shadows underneath this. So I'm going to click and I'm going to try to paint in like this, and then I'm going to go to the other side and I'm going to try to paint under this, and you can, and that's why I don't do this, because I wind up with that. I don't want this. But if you're really good at it, go for it. Now, I could help this out a little bit because these are jet black shadows. I could drop the opacity of this down a little bit, which would actually help, but that doesn't look right to me either. So I'm going to throw this away. I'm going to add another blank new layer. I'm going to rename it Shadows. And I'm going to show you the correct way of doing it. So we're going to use the gradient tool to do this. If you go to your toolbar in the very middle, there's a thing that looks like the gradient tool. It's called the gradient tool. Sometimes it shares that spot with the paint bucket. You don't want the paint bucket. You want to grab the gradient tool. And then up here in the very top, the very first thing you need to click on this drop-down menu in the options is that you do not want the gradient tool. You want the classic gradient tool for right now. This is gradient tool on training wheels, which is what we're really looking for here. So once you click on that classic gradient tool, then we need to pick the type of gradient that we want. Make sure that black is your foreground color so that your screen looks the same way as mine does. Again, if it's your background color, hit the X key. If it's neither one, hit the D key to get you to your default colors. Then in the drop-down menu here that's right to the right of Classic Gradient, if you click on this drop-down menu, you will have a whole series of pre-established gradients. If you click that, you can open up the Basic group. In the Basic group, if you hover over, there's only 3 of them. If you hover over the first one, it's basically foreground to background color. If you go in the next one, the middle one, it is foreground to transparency. If you go to the next one, it's just black and white. You want to pick the one in the very middle. Foreground to transparency. We are going from black to transparent. And then finally, there are 5 little icons that sit across the very top for the type of gradient that you want. If you click on the very first one, it's a linear gradient, and if you click and you drag out, you'll see what it does. It's a linear gradient. It goes from foreground to background color. That's what that one does. Command Z to undo that. If you go to the next one, it is a circular gradient. So if you click and drag down, you get a gradient that's in a circle. I'm going to undo that. The next one, these are like geometric gradients, so they actually are supposed to indicate plane, or some of them are supposed to indicate things like cones. The next one over, hit Command Z again. You can go to the next one over. The next one over is the cone one. So it's supposed to look like you're looking down at a cone or up into a church steeple. Command Z to undo that. The next one is a reflected gradient, means it starts from one of the colors to the other and then back again. And then finally is the one that's more like you're looking up in a steeple. So Command Z to undo that. If you really want to see what these are like, don't do the to transparent ones. It's easier. But at any rate, the one you want to pick here to do our shadows is the radial one. So again, classic gradient, foreground to transparency, radial gradient. And then we're working on our shadows layer. You're going to come over here in the middle and you're going to click and just pull down. So you've got this blob, black blob, in the middle of this that goes off to transparency. Does everybody have this? Good. We're going to transform this. Command T. So when you do Command T, It'll bring up the transform bounding box. You can actually modify this. So if you click the top arrow, the top handle that's up in the top in the middle, and you click and you pull down, it will crush your shadow from top to bottom. That's not what we want to do. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Instead, you want to hold down the Option key when you do this, and what you'll see happens is it will not only bring the top down, but it will bring the bottom up. So it will do this, it will crush it from both sides. So again, hold down your Option key, click and press down, and you'll see the bottom guy comes up. You can move this. You don't want to click near this anchor point, because if you do, you'll end up just moving the anchor point. But I can come into this space and click, and I can reposition my shadow so it's closer to being under her foot. And then my shadow is too wide now, so I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on the side handle. Sorry, not that. Side handle. And pull in. And again, I'm going to crush it a little bit more. So I'm basically trying to build the shape of the shadow that I want to go underneath this guy. And you'll see that in my case, it's also got part, it's still going out too wide. I don't care about that part, but it feels right to me now and the way this is looking. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark to do that. Immediately hit the E key for the eraser tool. In the eraser tool, again, in your drop-down menu, you want to make sure that your eraser is about a 50% hardness, that it is a brush. We're going to leave the opacity at 100%, and I'm going to do my flow around 20. We'll see. It might go too fast on me. But what I'm going to do, what you have to realize is that there's nothing that would explain the shadows that are on the sides of her feet. Look at this. Where is this shadow over here, and where's this shadow over here coming from? They can't come from anywhere. So you use the eraser tool to clean this up. I'm just going to scrub on this side to get rid of that one, and I'm going to scrub on that side to get rid of this one. And this is now the shadow that I've actually made for her. And if you turn this on and off right now, you can see just how different that was than the thing that we actually tried to paint earlier. Correct? I'm going to do one more layer. It helps to keep your shadows separate, so that if you do have to go back in and transform one, so I'm going to do shadow 2. And I'm going to zoom into her other foot. I'm going to hit the G key to get the gradient tool. I'm going to click and drag down, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. Hold down the Option key and crush this baby. I'm going to make it more narrow. But now I can rotate this. Look at her foot is on an angle. It's not just straight up and down. So I'm going to pull this down underneath her, and I'm going to rotate the shadow so that it more conforms to the line of her foot. Still going to narrow this down more and bring it in tighter. And then bring this move this forward just a little bit and crush it still a little bit more. Come on. And say OK. Hit the E key for the eraser. Get rid of all the shadow that's in the front. I can curve this down a little bit on the side and kill all the stuff that's in the back. And that's the shadow that I'm going to do for that. And then the shadows are just too dark, so I'm going to actually take the opacity of this and drop it back slightly. The other one's actually in a pretty good shape. So now my girl's anchored in space. And I don't paint. So anyway, if I could come up with 1 minute more of shit to tell you guys, no, I'm just kidding. That's it. Are there questions about the homework? Are we good on all of this? Okay, one last thing I will say. One last thing I want to say for people who have late work, I need you to start getting your late work in, but the problem a lot of people make is that they start to do the late work first, which ends up making the current work late. And so you're in this perpetual state of lateness. Don't do that. the assignment that is due next week is the one you want to work on first. And then if you can go back and get the assignment from last week and do that and turn it in 1 week late, you're good to go. Guys, anything that's more than a 1 week late, I don't take. So don't waste your time. Well, I would say waste your time on it to learn it, but your grade is your grade. I'll see you guys next week.